The first thing I felt in my new body was a knife in the back, and I mean that literally. 1 second, I was me, a guy from Earth whose most dangerous enemy was a Monday. The next, I was face down in the dirt of a place called the Monster Beast Mountain Range, wearing the body of a man named Li Wei, and Li Wei was extremely busy dying. His memories dumped into my skull all at once, like someone emptying a filing cabinet directly into my head, and the file on top, still warm, was the worst day of his life, which had also, conveniently, been his last. See, Li Wei had a fiancée, Mei Lian, pretty, cold, the kind of smile that comes with terms and conditions. She needed a rare spiritual plant to break through to her next stage, and wouldn't you know it, the thing only grew in the most monster-infested mountains in the region. So who does she bring along to fetch it? The devoted idiot who'd walk into a meat grinder if she asked nicely. He got the plant. He also got ambushed and half torn apart getting it. And when he crawled back, holding her precious little plant up like a trophy, she plucked it out of his hand, looked down at him the way you'd look at gum stuck to your shoe, and said, "You're no longer of any use to me. Go die in peace." Then she turned around and walked off. Left him there, in the dark, with the monsters still hungry. Cool. Very cool. Love that for him. That was the memory I woke up inside of. His despair, his disbelief, that specific flavor of betrayal you only get from someone you'd have died for deciding you're not worth the walk back. I felt all of it in about 2 seconds. And then I felt something else. I felt really, really petty about it. "Don't worry, buddy," I mumbled into the dirt with his mouth in his half-wrecked body. "I'll settle your gossip for you." When I finally got my eyes open for real, I wasn't in the mountains anymore. I was in a cave, and there was a woman standing over me. Now, I'd seen beautiful before. Earth had an entire industry for it. This was something else. This woman looked like somebody described the word fairy to a god, and the god decided to show off. White robes, skin that had clearly never once met sunlight, and a sword. A very real, very sharp sword, currently resting its tip against my forehead. "Morning," I said. It felt safer than screaming. Her name was Sun Shuying, though I wouldn't learn that for another minute. All I knew right then was that she was hurt. Poisoned by someone who'd been hunting her, half collapsed into this cave to burn it out of her own blood, and she'd found a dying stranger already lying there. Me. Dumped near the cave mouth by monsters who'd apparently eaten their fill and lost interest. She could have stepped over me and left. She didn't. Whatever it cost her to keep me breathing while she was busy not dying herself, she spent it. Which, in the etiquette of caves and cultivators, meant she now got to decide whether I kept the hours she'd bought me. She lowered the sword. Barely. "There's a small cauldron sitting in your chest," she said, like that was a normal sentence to say to a man you'd known for 40 seconds. "It's asleep. Whoever left it inside you did you a favor and a curse in the same breath." She pressed 2 fingers to my sternum. A thread of light slid into me, and something under my ribs woke up with a hum I felt in my back teeth. "What did you just do to me?" "Repaid a debt," she said. "Now we're even." Then she told me the thing that would run the next 2 years of my life. She was promised to someone, she said. Betrothed to the strongest young man of a place called the Taishuan sect, wedding 3 years out, and she would sooner eat her own sword than go through with it. But if anyone happened to be strong enough to walk into the Taishuan sect in 2 years and beat that man in front of everyone, well, that person could have her hand instead. I looked at this woman who had just chosen to save a total stranger over saving herself an inconvenience, and I thought about the last face I'd woken up remembering, the one that said, "Go die in peace." "I'll come get you," I said. 2 years, I'll trample your saint into the dirt and marry you myself." She smiled. The first ray of morning kind of smile, and I could tell she didn't believe a single word of it, which was fair, because I was a level 2 nobody in a borrowed broken body with a debt and a grudge and nothing else. But I meant it, and here's the thing about me, I keep my promises, unlike certain people whose names rhyme with Melian. Then she was gone, the way everyone in this world is always dramatically gone the instant you get attached, and I was alone in a cave with a humming rock in my chest and absolutely no idea where this Taishuan sect even was. Baby steps. The rock in my chest, it turned out, was not a rock. The second I bled on it, because apparently in this world you solve every single problem by dripping blood on it, the cave vanished and I got yanked into some kind of endless white void. Chaos, capital C. And floating in the middle of it was the flickering ghost of an old man who looked one stiff breeze away from blowing apart entirely. "Finally," he rasped. "Any longer and I'd have kicked the bucket in here waiting for you." "Who are? No time. Awakening you first. Chaos, holy body." He stabbed a finger at me before I could get the question out, and a river of power poured straight into my bones. It felt like being taken apart and rebuilt from the inside by someone working against a deadline. When it stopped, I checked myself over. The half-dead level 2 wreck was gone. I'd jumped a full realm, straight to martial artist. The kind of thing that takes normal people a couple of years and most of their money, just handed to me like a party favor. Okay, that's okay. What is a chaos holy body? Strongest physique in the history of this continent, the ghost said, already going see-through around the edges. Not suppressed by heaven or earth. One shows up every few thousand years, always right before the world goes dark, to answer the calamity. Congratulations. You're the second. I was the first. That sounds like a truly enormous amount of responsibility that I did not personally sign up for. The cauldron in your chest is a chaos cauldron, a divine artifact from the beginning of time. Whatever you do, do not flash it in front of powerful people, or they'll what? Hey, finish the sentence. Finish the sen. He finished nothing. He just gave me the serene little smile of a man successfully handing all his problems to the next guy and dispersed into sparkles. I already hate you, I told the empty void. He did leave one thing behind besides the cliffhanger. A few scraps of instruction floated into my head about the cauldron. It was damaged, of course it was. Nothing in this new life of mine arrived unbroken, but some of it still worked, and what worked, I found out about 10 minutes later, was going to change absolutely everything. The first thing I tested it on was a wolf, not just any wolf, the exact gray monster that had ambushed the old Li Wei and kicked off this whole dying in the mud situation. It came out of the trees at me, twice my height, quick as a bad decision. Old me would have been an appetizer. New me picked up the little iron cauldron, walked straight into the pounce, and clonked the thing over the head with it like I was tenderizing a very large steak. The wolf's skull came apart. The wolf did not get up. I stood there holding a dented cooking pot, staring at a first-tier monster that a triple-level cultivator couldn't have walked away from, and it was thoroughly, completely dead. That weak? I said out loud. It felt almost rude to the wolf. Then I got curious. Li Wei's memories told me that demon cores, the little energy stones inside monsters, normally have to be refined by an alchemist before a person can absorb them, and even then you lose most of the good part. So I dropped the wolf's core into the cauldron, just to see. 2 breaths later, a single drop of milky liquid rolled out, smelling faintly sweet. I licked it off my finger because I have never once, in either life, made a smart choice under mild pressure and, oh no, that is the good stuff. Pure energy, 0 impurities, better than anything a professional could wring out of 100 cores, and my body drank it down like it had been dying of thirst its whole life. Let me put it plainly, because this is the part that matters. Every monster in these mountains had just become a juice box, and I was very, very thirsty. Half a day of enthusiastic hunting later, sword in one hand and soup pot in the other, giggling like a man who's found the cheat menu, I'd punched my way up to martial artist level 2 in an afternoon. The #1 prodigy in my hometown had needed half a year to cross the same gap. I did it between lunch and a light snack. Chaos holy body, a beautiful, broken, wonderful thing. On my way out of the mountains, I heard a very familiar noise, someone getting comfortable in the bushes, and I stumbled straight onto Chen Hao. Chen Hao was a recurring character in Li Wei's memories. Rich kid, one of the 4 big families back in Qingshan City, spent years using his higher rank to beat the stuffing out of the original me purely for entertainment. A solid third of the scars on this body had his signature on them, and right this minute he was rolling around half-dressed in a clearing with a lady friend, completely unaware that the universe had just handed his favorite punching bag a serious upgrade. Wow, I called out, leaning against a tree. Naked in the woods, middle of the day, bold. Aren't you worried about catching a cold somewhere important? He shot up so fast he nearly took his lady friend's eye out with an elbow. Then he saw who'd said it, and his face traveled the whole road from panic to that specific rich boy sneer I already hated on instinct. Li Wei, he spat my name. You worthless piece of trash. You've got a death wish sneaking up on me. Do you have any idea who I am? I'm going to break every bone you have, slowly, and then Then you're going to what? I said. Finish the sentence. I've got all afternoon. Take your time. Here's the thing about rich boys. They cannot stand being interrupted. His whole face went red, then a color that isn't in the standard set, and he charged me mid-threat, still narrating my death, absolutely certain the timid Li Wei he'd been beating up for years was somewhere inside this new one. He was wrong, and he never did finish that sentence. I just kicked. Once. Precisely. Upward. There was a sound. I'll spare you the specifics. I'll only say it was crunchier than anyone present was hoping for, and that, judging by the acoustics, it involved more than one item. Chen Hao folded onto the ground in a shape I hadn't known a human body could make, making a noise like a kettle with regrets. I crouched down next to him with what I felt was genuine sympathy. This is for every scar you put on this body when it couldn't fight back, I told him. We're square now. Mostly. Then I stood, gave his horrified girlfriend some sincere medical advice about getting him to a healer before his future bloodline became strictly theoretical, and walked off. I didn't kill him, I know. Rookie error. Don't worry about it. It comes back around. Home was Qingshan City, and home was the Li family estate, and the first thing home did when I walked in was try to hit me. That was my grandfather, Gu Yunshan, head of the Li clan, roughly 900 years old in spirit and armed with the fastest slipper in the province. I stepped through the door and he came up out of his chair roaring about where in the world I'd been, a level 2 piece of trash wandering off into the monster mountains to get himself killed. Here's the thing you have to understand about my grandfather. Every insult out of his mouth was love wearing a bad disguise. I was the only bloodline the Li family had left. If I died, his whole line died with me, so every time I stubbed a toe, the old man aged a decade. He chased me around the great hall of our own house, a dignified clan leader swatting at his own grandson, and honestly, after a whole life of being nobody's anything, I did not hate it one bit. We didn't get far into the reunion before a guard announced visitors, the Mei family, and in walked the woman herself, Mei Lian, in the flesh. She flashed surprise for half a second at seeing me upright and breathing, then swallowed it, because she'd come here to do a thing, and she was going to do it. Her grandfather Song Jian trailed behind her looking like he'd rather be literally anywhere else, and he had reason to, since the Mei family had climbed to where they were on Li family help, and this was a spectacularly ungrateful house call. Mei Lian felt no such thing. She produced the marriage certificate, lifted her chin, and announced she was here to cancel our engagement. My grandfather slammed the table and went off like a firecracker. I just held out my hand. "Give me the certificate," I said. She handed it over, a nasty little smile on her face, expecting me to beg. I tore it in half, then in quarters, then I let the pieces fall. "If I don't want you," I told her, "then get out and stop blocking the doorway." She sputtered something about how tearing paper didn't prove anything, so I leaned in close enough that only she could hear, and I said, "I haven't forgotten the Monster Beast mountain range. We'll settle up later." And I watched the color leave her face, because for 1 second she remembered leaving a bleeding man to die and wondered how he was standing in front of her. Then she rebuilt her sneer, informed me she was off to join the prestigious Xiaoshuan sect, and swept out with old Song Jian scurrying after her. Fine by me. Because the thing about Mei Lian announcing where she was going was that she just told me exactly where to find her, and the Xiaoshuan sect was, I happen to need to know, one of the few places in the world that might tell me where the Taishuan sect was hiding. My grandfather thought I was heartbroken. He kept giving me these worried looks. Compared to Sun Shuying, Mei Lian was a rounding error, but I didn't tell him that. I just told him to spread the word all over the city that I had divorced her. Get ahead of the story. He liked that. First real smile I'd seen on him. Then he dropped the small detail that the Xiaoshuan sect entrance exam was in 1 month and that with my realm I had, in his professional estimation, no hope whatsoever. "Don't worry, Laoye," I said. "I'll pass." He did not look reassured. Smart man. Before any of that though, I had bills. Killing monsters is free. Everything else in a cultivation world costs money, and I had a pile of monster pelts and demon cores and 0 spirit stones. So I went to the treasure pavilion, which is the fancy shop in town, richer than all 4 great families put together, and I made my second favorite kind of mistake. I trusted a shopkeeper. I laid out 20 first-tier pelts, top quality, easily worth 1,000 low-grade spirit stones. The shopkeeper looked at them, looked at me, remembered the rumors about cowardly little Li Wei, and offered me 500. Then, before I could even say no, he snatched the pelts, threw me a bag of stones, and told me to get lost. Open robbery. In broad daylight. With a smile. So I stopped smiling back. When his guards rushed me, including one who'd actually reached the martial artist level, I put all of them on the floor in about the time it takes to describe it, and I put the shopkeeper down next to them. That was when a voice like warm poison drifted out from the back of the shop. "Who's causing trouble in my treasure pavilion?" Her name was Jiang Hui Mei. She owned the place, she wore a purple dress that was doing a great deal of work, and she came with a rumor attached, which was that no man who got close to her ever lived more than 3 years. Something about her using them up. The whole crowd outside was placing bets on how I'd die. She got the real story out of her guards fast, dragged the crooked shopkeeper off to meet the pavilion's famously unpleasant rules, and then, to smooth things over in front of a watching crowd, she invited me upstairs. Second floor. "Pick anything you like, little brother." I asked her point blank whether she was giving me a gift or planning to become one of my 3 years. She laughed, told me with all these witnesses how could a big sister possibly take advantage, and she pulled me upstairs anyway. The second floor was stuffed with things worth more than my entire clan, and I walked right past all of them to a plain black sword hanging in a corner. No shine, no glow, nothing special to look at. I liked it immediately. Jiang Huimei laughed again, gentler this time. "You've got an eye, little brother. That's the black gold sword. Medium-grade spiritual artifact. Problem is, it's cursed heavy. Nobody's ever been able to swing it in a real fight, so it's just sat here collecting dust. Pick something you can actually use." I picked it up. It felt like a sword. I gave it an experimental swing. It felt like a sword going fast. I did not mention this to her. I want the black gold sword, I said. She sighed, told me it cost 30,000 low-grade spirit stones, which was roughly 30,000 more than I had, and watched me walk out the door owing her a fortune. I could feel her staring at my back the whole way, not the 3 years kind of staring, the what exactly are you kind, which, honestly, was the same look I gave myself in the mirror every morning. Back home, I dug the best sword manual the Lee family owned out of the vault. It was called the Thunderbolt sword technique, and its whole personality was speed. Shifu it, and you could throw 3 sword strikes in the time most people threw one, fast enough to leave after images hanging in the air. My grandfather had spent decades on this manual and gotten it to what they called major achievement. Respectable, a real accomplishment for an old cultivator. I took it out to the courtyard, read it once, and had it at major achievement in about an hour. I stood there with the black gold sword humming in my hand, having just pierced a boulder clean through with 3 strikes so fast the rock didn't know it had been stabbed until it fell apart, and I thought, the chaos holy body doesn't just make me strong, it makes me learn like the universe is cheating on my behalf. I did not have long to enjoy that feeling, because the Lee family arrived to ruin my afternoon. Turns out, you can't kick a rich boy in the family jewels without his relatives taking it personally. Chen Bo, the Lee clan chief, stormed into our hall dragging both his grandsons and demanding satisfaction. My grandfather, bless him, tried to defend me on the grounds that a level 2 nobody couldn't possibly have crushed anyone's anything, which was a solid argument right up until I strolled in and cheerfully admitted I'd done it on purpose. Chen Hao, still walking a little carefully, screamed for a life-or-death duel. Right there, right then, my grandfather went white. He knew my realm. He was already planning how to throw the match and eat the shame to keep me alive. I accept, I said. We stepped into the courtyard. Chen Hao drew his sword, and because he was the kind of man who narrates his own greatness, he started explaining in loving detail how he was going to make me feel every second of it, how he'd crush this and shatter that, a whole itinerary of my suffering. I let him get about halfway through the tour, then the black tip of my sword was already through his forehead, and the rest of his sentence never made it out. Too much talking in a death duel, I told the body as it dropped. That's what got your eggs cracked in the first place. The whole courtyard went silent. My grandfather made a sound like a kettle. And into that silence stepped Chen Hao's older brother, Chen Long. 6th level of martial artist, the actual prodigy of the Li family, a genuine problem. He pointed at me and demanded his own life-or-death duel, and old Chen Bo, eyes full of hate, sweetened it, because he was that sure his good grandson couldn't lose. If Chen Long fell, he said, the Li family would hand over one of their mines, a mine. In a world that runs on spirit stones, a mine is a river of money that never runs dry. My grandfather nearly fainted at the size of the bet. Done, I said. 3 days. The central arena. Chen Bo smiled the smile of a man who thinks he's about to win everything, and Chen Long left thinking the same, and my grandfather grabbed me the second they were gone and tried to beat me to death himself for agreeing to fight a 6th level opponent without asking. Grandpa, I said, ducking. Lao Ye, I promise I've got this. You've got what? What realm are you even at that I can't read you anymore? 2nd level, but I'll be at 3rd soon. He stared at me like I'd started speaking in tongues, but I'd killed Chen Hao with one strike right in front of him, so somewhere under the panic, a little hope was flickering. He didn't understand it. He just knew his useless grandson had come back from those mountains as something he couldn't see the bottom of. Neither could I, honestly. That was the fun part. 3 days wasn't much, so I spent it the way I'd end up spending most of my life in this world. Killing things for profit. But first I did 2 smart things, which for me is a record. The first was for my grandfather. I went back to Zhang Huimei and asked about a pill that could shove a stuck old cultivator up to his next level. The 8 directions elixir, she said. 2 of them would do it. 6,000 spirit stones. I had roughly 0 spirit stones, a promise, and a real gift for violence, so I told her to hold them and went to go earn it. The second smart thing was insurance. I asked her straight out whether she'd protect the Li family if things ever got bad. The treasure pavilion stayed neutral in city politics on principle, so she smiled and slid right past the question. But she said she would help me on one condition, and she'd only tell me the condition after I passed the Shaoxuan sect exam, if I passed. Which, she added, would be hard, because the sect took only 3 people from the whole city, and 2 of the 3 spots were already gone. Mei Lian had one. A boy named Wang Jing had the other. I filed that name away and went to make money. The Monster Beast Mountain Range and I were becoming close personal friends. I went in deep this time and found an iron palm bear, a tier 1 intermediate with paws hard enough to strike sparks off steel. My first swing bounced clean off and launched me into a tree, so I poured spiritual energy into the black gold sword, which is the entire point of a spiritual artifact, and the second swing took both its paws off, and the third went through its skull. Very good demon core for the record. Sweet finish. I was elbow deep in bear when the mercenaries found me. The Black Bear Mercenary Group. Lovely people. Their whole trade was robbing cultivators who came to the mountains to train, and they were led by a woman who troweled on enough makeup to spackle a wall, all of it losing a slow war with the decades underneath. 4th level, dozens of men, and she wanted my pelts, my cores, and, I got the sense, possibly me. Little brother, she purred, and the purr was doing a lot of heavy lifting. Hand over the pelts and the cores and be a good boy, and maybe your big sister keeps you around for the night. Big sister, I repeated. Right. I have a firm rule about surrendering my hard-earned monster juice, which is that I don't. And I have a bad habit around people who threaten me, which is that I review their appearance out loud. See, here's the thing, I said. You've got wrinkles deep enough to lose a fly in, you're wearing enough powder to bury a small dog, and you're out here batting your eyelashes like a shy young maiden. That takes real confidence. I respect it. I don't want to sleep with it, but I respect it. The powder very nearly slid clean off her face. Turns out that was her one exposed nerve, and I'd stepped square on it with a full boot. Somewhere in the crowd, a henchman went, very quietly, "Oh no," because they knew. She'd apparently taken people apart in public for a lot less than what I'd just said, and the whole clearing understood, before I did, that I'd just signed a warrant. "Arrest him!" she screeched, all the honey gone out of her voice. "I want to tear this one to pieces myself." Dozens of mercenaries charged. It wasn't a fight, it was a demonstration. Black sword, 3 strikes to the beat, after images hanging in the air like smoke, and one by one the famously feared Black Bear Mercenary Group learned they had robbed exactly the wrong kid on exactly the wrong afternoon. Halfway through, the survivors stopped charging and started running, which never works, and I want that noted for the record. I saved the boss for last. She threw her one big palm strike, all her 4th level strength behind it, absolutely certain of it. I slipped inside it and ran the black gold sword straight through her palm and out the far side. She went down, staring at her own hand, looking deeply, personally insulted that the universe had allowed this. "You should have just bought the pelts," I told her. Then she wasn't listening anymore. 3,000 spirit stones off the bodies. Not bad for an afternoon of being insulted first. I stayed 3 more days, hunting like a man possessed, feeding cores to the cauldron every night and drinking the good stuff, and by the end, I'd punched through 2 more levels to martial artist, 4th. Then I went and bought my grandfather his 2 pills. Handing that little box to the old man was one of the better moments of my new life. He opened it, saw 2 8 directions elixirs sitting inside, and his hands actually shook. The Lee family had been too poor for medicine like that for years. He tried to push the box back, muttering that he was too old to waste good pills on himself. "Grandpa," I said, pushing it right back, "can a real man please stop dawdling? The Lee family is about to try to wipe us out. You break through, we survive, and this stuff becomes our breakfast going forward. Eat the pills." He looked at me for a long second. Then he laughed, loud and delighted, told me I was his grandson after all, and for the first time since I'd worn this face, the old man looked genuinely, uncomplicatedly happy. I'll be honest with you. That one got me. I didn't reach for a joke to cover it. Some things you just let sit. Then it was arena day. The central arena was packed. Word had gotten around that Trash Lee Wei was about to fight a life-or-death duel with the Lee family prodigy, and the whole city had turned out to watch me die. There's a very specific kind of crowd at these things. They bring snacks, they crack sunflower seeds between their teeth, and lay bets and settle in like it's dinner theater, and their favorite show, always, is a nobody getting taken apart. I'm going to be checking in with these seed crackers a lot, by the way. They're a dependable audience. Chen Long jumped onto the platform looking supremely pleased with himself, and in his hand was the Fiend Blade, the Lee family's most treasured weapon, a real spiritual artifact they'd only dug out because old Chen Bo wanted me exceptionally dead. The seed crackers gasped in appreciation. Before we started, I made a point of chatting with Laoye Li below the platform, loud enough to carry. "The mine still counts, right? If I win?" "It counts," he ground out, 100% certain it never would. "And once I kill this grandson too," I went on, "there won't be a single Li left willing to duel me, will there?" Which was my polite way of announcing to the entire arena that the Li family was down to its last card. Chen Bo's face could have soured milk at 40 paces. "You killed my little brother with one sword," Chen Long called across the platform, rolling his shoulders, the Fiend Blade humming in his hand. "So I'm going to take you apart one piece at a time, an hour at least, maybe 2. I want the whole city to hear you beg." 2 hours, I said. "You've really thought about this. That's almost sweet. You practice it in a mirror?" His sneer flickered. "Good." Then we began. Chen Long was 7th level now, 3 whole realms above me, and he came in fast and confident, the kind of confident that money buys, and I met him with the Thunderbolt sword technique. Except I'd quietly nudged the technique past my grandfather's lifetime best all the way to great perfection, so what he'd braced for as 3 strikes arrived as a wall of them, one folding into the next, into the next. First exchange, he went flying off his own feet. He got up furious, spitting about impossible and cheating, and swung that precious fiend blade at me with everything he had, and I let the swords meet. On purpose, because I wanted him to feel exactly what was coming. His spiritual artifact struck my black gold sword. His spiritual artifact was low grade. Mine was a full grade higher, and the Li family's most treasured heirloom, the sword old Chenbo had gambled a mine to put in his grandson's hand, came apart in a spray of cracks and fell to the boards in pieces. The look on Chenlong's face. Somebody get me a painter. I want that framed. Idiot, I told him gently, the way you'd correct a child. Too much talking in a death duel. It's a family flaw. Second strike went through his neck, and he dropped next to the ruins of his heirloom. Dead silence in the arena. You could have heard a sunflower seed fall. Then 100 people, all at once, did the frantic internal math on exactly which horse they just bet their savings against, and the whole crowd made a low collective sound like a wave pulling back from a beach. He killed Chenlong. 2 strikes, trash Li Wei. He shattered the fiend blade, their spiritual artifact, like it was cheap glass. That's both grandsons. In 3 days. Somebody check on old Chenbo, he doesn't look… Clan Chief Li, I called into the noise, cutting through it. You wouldn't go back on your word in front of all these witnesses, would you? Chenbo handed over the deed to the mine through his teeth, 3 days to deliver, and turned to go. A lot of people noticed his hands shaking. It wasn't grief. It was the pure effort of staying upright, because watching both grandsons die and the family treasure turn to gravel inside a single minute had aged the man 10 years where he stood. Up in a restaurant window over the arena, Jiang Huimei watched the whole thing with a wine cup frozen halfway to her mouth. Later, I'd find out what she was thinking, which ran roughly, this kid's growth rate is terrifying, and I've got 30,000 spirit stones of reasons to keep an eye on it. Me, I went home and got yelled at by my grandfather for learning his sword technique better than he had in 40 years. The insults, as always, were love. Peace lasted about a day. The bad news came in 2 ugly pieces. First, Wang Jing, the other kid with a guaranteed Shaosun slot, had suddenly thrown away his free pass and announced he'd sit the entrance exam the hard way, like everyone else. Second, and this explained the first, Wang Jing was now engaged to Mei Lian. Let me connect those dots for you, since I connected them in about a second. Mei Lian dumps me, latches onto the #1 prodigy in the city, and now that prodigy is voluntarily giving up an easy ride specifically to be in the same exam room as me. The Mei family had folded itself neatly into the Qi family, and the whole arrangement had a single purpose stapled to the front of it. Kill Li Wei. My grandfather was disgusted, mostly because Wang Jing was already 9th level, 5 entire realms over my head, and here I was cheerfully signing up to share a room with him. He suggested very reasonably that I simply not attend. It's fine, I told him. This kind of opponent just makes me want it more. Then I went back to the mountains to get strong enough to mean that. The mountains had a welcome party waiting, a dozen+ men, and at the front a guy who looked exactly like the makeup-caked mercenary boss I'd killed on account of being her brother, Black Bear. The actual leader of the Black Bear mercenary group, 7th level, and he'd come to avenge his sister. He wanted to do it with ceremony, at her grave, using my blood as an offering. So I let them tie me up. I know how that sounds, but I was curious where the grave was, and I wanted the whole set before I emptied it out. They marched me an hour up the mountain to a stronghold, sat me down in front of a fresh grave draped in white funeral paper, and Black Bear knelt in front of it and told his dead sister in this thick, choked voice that he'd caught the monster who killed her and he'd wash her headstone in my blood. It was almost touching. It would have been more touching if his sister hadn't opened our relationship by trying to rob and murder me, but grief rewrites things. Kid. He stood, drew a knife. Come kneel. Kowtow to her a few times. Do it nicely, and I'll make your end quick. Hard pass, I said. He didn't care for that. He gestured, and 2 of his men grabbed my shoulders to force my head down toward the grave. That was about the point I stopped playing along. I flexed. The ropes didn't so much snap as detonate, and the 2 men holding me went stumbling into the dirt. Black Bear staggered back, steel-spiked gloves coming up, suddenly a whole lot less certain of the afternoon. Your sister tried to rob me, I said, standing, brushing the grave dirt off my knees. And then she tried to kill me. You came all this way to do the exact same thing, so here's how the family reunion ends. The black gold sword was already in my hand. His steel gloves and his enormous confidence arrived at it together, and neither one survived the introduction. Neither did anyone else in the group. Wiping out the Black Bear mercenary group turned out to be the kind of thing people would have thrown me a parade for. Thousands of cultivators had died to those bandits over the years. Nobody was going to miss them. Their vault made the detour worth it. Heaps of low-grade stones, a few dozen mid-grade ones, which run 1,000 low-grade each and got me genuinely emotional. But the real find was a sword manual, a grade above my Thunderbolt technique, called 100 Refinements Swordplay. Its whole idea was that the longer a fight dragged on, the faster your sword got. I decided to learn it live, on monsters, which is the fun way. What I did not know, back in the city, was that old Chen Bo had gone to see the head of the Qi clan, and that the two families I'd spent the week humiliating had just quietly agreed to stop being rivals long enough to scrub the Li family off the map, starting with me, at the exam. 20 days in the mountains did wonderful things for me. I fought monsters by day and fed their cores to the cauldron by night, and I climbed all the way to martial artist's 6th level, which, for reference, is what the great Wang Jing had needed 2 years and a mountain of family money to reach. I did it in under 3 weeks with a soup pot, and the realm wasn't even the best part. Somewhere in there, the Chaos Holy Body coughed up a secret technique of its very own, the Chaotic Void-piercing art. When I lit it up, my hair went white, my wounds sealed, and for a handful of breaths, I hit like a samurai realm expert, way over my actual level. The catch, and there is always a catch, was that the instant it wore off, I felt scooped hollow, like the technique had drained my entire savings account to rent those few seconds. Emergency use only. Noted, filed, underlined. I timed my trip to be home the day before the exam. I walked through the gate of the Li estate, and the place was wrong. Too quiet, no guards out front. And when I reached the Great Hall, I understood why. There were bodies, Li family guards, bandaged and bleeding, some of them not getting up again, and my grandfather sitting in the middle of it, gray-faced and hurt. The Li family had never paid the mine. They'd stalled, and when my grandfather finally forced his way in to collect, he'd caught them smashing it, destroying the whole thing rather than hand it over. He'd fought. And then some mysterious reinforcements had turned up on the Li side, strong ones, and the Li family had been driven off bloody. Nobody had to tell me whose reinforcements those were. I could feel the Qi family's fingerprints all over it. "It's fine, Laoya," I said, and I meant it in a way that made the wounded guards lift their heads. "The Li family is going to be fine." Then I went and sold every pelt I'd hunted, 50,000 spirit stones worth, bought a wagon of healing medicine, passed it out to the guards, and put 30,000 stones into my grandfather's hands. He took it without a word. We both knew what tomorrow was. "If you get into the Shaoxuan sect," he said quietly, "we might just survive this." "With me here," I said. "The Li family lives forever. Get some rest, old man." The Shaoxuan sect held its exam in the woods outside the city, and half of Qingshan City came to watch, chairs and snacks and all. The seed crackers were out in force. Running it was an elder named Wei Long, a Shaoxuan man in charge of recruiting our whole region. The 4 great families had front row seats. My grandfather sat there radiating total confidence in me, which made the other 3 chiefs snicker because to them the Li boy was a walking punchline with an expiration date. Mei Lian found me before it started and advised me to withdraw and spare myself the embarrassment. "You dumped me and got engaged to the next guy in the same week," I said pleasantly. "I don't really take advice from weather vanes." Wang Jing strolled over, slid an arm around her waist, and told me to watch my mouth or he'd tear it off during the exam. I looked at him, looked at her, and said, "You're awfully excited about the stuff I threw out." Their faces did a wonderful thing. The seed crackers nearly choked. Then Wei Long laid out the rules. 2 rounds. The first tested your body against pressure. The second was a bracket. 2 spots at the end. Round 1 was a gravity formation, a blue dome of weight that kept doubling. Half the field dropped out in the first half hour. An hour in, gravity hit 10 times normal and everyone left was soaked through and trembling, even Wang Jing. Everyone except me. I was, in the crowd's polite words, managing it quite easily. In honest words, I was bored and thinking about a nap. The Chaos Holy Body considered 10 times gravity a nice firm mattress. When the last of the others finally folded, coughing blood, 10 of us were left, and it was time to draw lots and start cutting. The Qimei Li Alliance had a plan, which was to feed me their people one at a time until somebody wore me down, and I kept drawing lot number 1, which meant I fought first every round, which suited me perfectly. First up, Mei Ming, Mei Lian's brother, 7th level, genuinely dangerous among the younger crowd, and out for blood on his sister's behalf. "You humiliated Lian," he snarled, circling. "I'm going to cripple you, and then I'm going to make you crawl to her and beg." "See, everyone in this family has the exact same fantasy," I said. "The crawling, the begging. It's a little concerning. Have you all considered talking to someone?" I checked with Wei Long first, just to be polite. "Killing him's allowed, yes?" "It's fine," said Wei Long, who had by now given up pretending he wasn't watching me, like I was the only thing worth watching in the woods. Mei Ming lunged, all 7th level speed and fury. 1 strike. His head and the rest of him went their separate ways, and his sword clattered to the platform a full second before the rest of him remembered to fall. The crowd made the sound a crowd makes when it realizes the joke has been on them the whole time. And in the front row, Mei Lian went the exact color of old paper because that was two of her people I'd put down in front of her now, and she was finally starting to do the arithmetic on what, precisely, she had woken up. Next bracket, I drew a Li family boy named Chen Tao. He took one look at what was left of Mei Ming, and when my sword stopped a finger width from his forehead, he shrieked that he surrendered. So I let him, patted his shoulder, told him to say it sooner next time. I'd nearly lost control. He walked off the platform and, I heard later, kept walking right out of the Li family because it turned out they'd only propped him up as a replacement prodigy after I'd killed off the real ones, and he was done being disposable. And somewhere in all that, a quiet girl from a second-rate clan named Lin Qing rode the wreckage I left behind straight into the top 3. She hadn't beaten anyone frightening. She just happened to land in the half of the bracket that wasn't standing in front of me. Afterward, she came up red-faced and sincere and thanked me like I'd handed her the moon. That's on you for being strong enough to still be standing, I said. Anyway, thank you. And she meant it all the way down, and I want you to hold on to her because loyal people are rare in this world, and she turned out to be one of the very few. Then Wei Long called the final round, and I told him not to bother drawing lots. I want a life-or-death duel, I said, with Wang Jing. And the whole clearing went silent, except for one man in the back who dropped his entire bag of sunflower seeds. Wang Jing was happy to oblige. He'd been sent here to kill me, and I'd just saved him the trouble of inventing an excuse. We stepped onto the platform. He drew a battle sword that shimmered gold, a low-grade spiritual artifact called the Flowing Blade, and promised to make me pay 100 times over for insulting his fiancée. Below us, his grandfather laughed about how a 6th-level nobody couldn't so much as touch a 9th-level genius holding a spiritual artifact. My grandfather's knuckles went white. Low-grade spiritual artifact, I said, and gave the black gold sword a little shake. Nobody told you mine's a grade higher. He sneered. I opened with the thunderbolt technique, and to his credit, he blocked all 3 strikes clean. Then he answered with real weight behind him, so I switched to 100 refinements and we actually fought, the good kind, the kind where my sword gets faster the longer it runs, and slowly I started to press him. That's when he stopped playing. His aura detonated. Samurai Realm. A hidden trump card, a whole realm above where he'd been pretending to sit, and the pressure of it dropped onto the platform like a falling mountain. The whole front row flinched back in their seats. You really believed, Wang Jing said, almost pitying now, that a piece of gutter trash from a dying clan could stand in front of me. I let you think so. It's more fun this way. His next blow parried mine and still hurled me across the platform. The one after that opened me up, red in my mouth, red on the boards, and then he didn't finish it. He slowed down, smiling, because now he got to take his time, and he wanted the whole city to watch every second. The seed crackers went dead silent. My grandfather was on his feet screaming my name, 3 clan chiefs holding him back by the arms. And Mei Lian wore the exact face she'd worn walking away from a dying man in the mountains, cool and satisfied, and she said out loud, to no one in particular, that dumping me had been the best decision of her life. I planted the black gold sword and dragged myself up on it, wiped my mouth, and started to laugh, low and wrong, which rattled him, because you are not supposed to laugh when you're losing. You've got a trump card, I said. What makes you think I don't? Chaotic, void-piercing art. Gold light tore out of me and shot into the sky, my wounds sealed. My black hair went white, the whole clearing felt the air change, and Wang Jing's face pulled tight because all of a sudden he couldn't sense a single thread of my energy, like I'd stepped clean out of the world. He swung anyway, told me I was still no match. I didn't even move my feet. I just flicked the black gold sword out, one thin line of black light, and his precious flowing blade shattered like it was spun from sugar. The game's over, I said from behind him, because I was already there. There was a flash, and then Wang Jing was in 2 pieces, and the #1 prodigy of Qingshan City was redecorating the platform. Quiet, the real kind, where you can hear your own heartbeat. Then the arena came apart with noise, because Trash Li Wei had just killed the city's best in front of the entire city. I let the technique go, my hair went black, and that hollowed-out weakness rolled over me so hard I had to lean on the sword to stay upright. A few breaths. That was all that state ever gave me. I filed that away too, harder this time. Wei Long read out the results. Lin Qing, 1st place. Me, 2nd. Everyone in that clearing understood the 2nd was really the 1st. My grandfather half carried me home and set 3 tables of food in front of me, and the whole Li estate, guards and servants and all, celebrated like the sky had cracked open and started raining silver, because for the first time in years, the family had a future with a name attached. My name. And across the city, in a much colder room, Wang Lei, head of the Qi family, told old Chen Bo that Li Wei would not live to see tomorrow's sunset, while Mei Lian stood in the dark, celebrating nothing, staring at nothing, finally starting to understand exactly what she'd left behind in a cave in the mountains. They came at dawn, obviously. Villains love a dawn. The Qi and Li families surrounded the Li estate, 100+ armed cultivators, Wang Lei and Chen Bo out front. My grandfather and our battered guards packed into the gateway. Grandpa told me to run, save myself, keep the bloodline alive, let him buy the time. Grandpa, I said, the Li family is going to be fine. Watch. Wang Lei opened his mouth to gloat, and my grandfather just charged him. And here's the surprise. Those 2 8 directions elixirs had done their job. The old man had broken through, and now he was holding his own against a clan chief, even edging ahead, fighting like he intended to drag Wang Lei into the next life personally, which left Chen Bo for me. Now I was a 6th level kid, Chen Bo was a clan chief several realms over me, and my one real trump card left me flat on my back afterward, so I couldn't just spend it on him. I needed to stall. I'd sent word to Jiang Huimei that morning, and I was quietly praying she'd cash in her mystery condition early, so I did the thing I do. I fought dirty. I charged Chen Bo like I meant to trade honest, honorable, realm-appropriate blows. He set his feet, a proud samurai realm master, ready to swat the ant out of the air. And at the very last second, instead of a sword, I opened my hand and flung a fistful of flour and pepper straight into his eyes. I'd grabbed it off the kitchen shelf on my way out the door. Best decision of my morning. It is very hard to look dignified while sneezing. Chen Bo learned this in real time. The terror of Qingshan City went down clawing at his own face, eyes streaming, absolutely roaring that a mere ant had dared to trick him, which, yes, that was the entire plan. Do keep up. You cowardly little Achu. I'll tear you, Achu, to pieces. Take your time, I said, backing away smoothly. Blink it out. I'm in no rush. I was in a tremendous rush. I was stalling for my life. He came after me anyway, half blind, swinging on pure instinct. The trouble with pure instinct is that it still needs working eyes to aim, and his sent him charging off in completely the wrong direction. And who, precisely, was arriving from that exact direction at that exact moment? Jiang Huimei. Chen Bo, unable to see a thing, reached out and grabbed her. I wanted on the record that I did not plan this. I also wanted on the record that I could not, in 1,000 years, have planned it one bit better. Jiang Huimei took profound personal offense to a strange man grabbing her, and she beat Chen Bo most of the way to the next life before she'd fully worked it out of her system. Wang Lei took one long look at the head of the treasure pavilion, casually folding a clan chief in half, remembered exactly how terrifying she became the day she stopped being neutral, and called off the entire siege where he stood. I'm protecting the Li family now, she told them, calm as still water. Any objections? There were no objections. That was her condition, as it happened. She'd shield the family, but only so far, because the Qi family had backers. Even she couldn't fight forever. If I wanted us truly safe, I had to grow. And then, almost as an afterthought, she mentioned that her daughter was already at the Shaoxuan sect. Zhang Meili. She asked me to look out for the girl. I promised I would, which was easy since I had no idea yet how much trouble that one particular promise would turn out to be. Then I said goodbye to my grandfather, swung up onto a fast horse, and rode out of Qingshan City toward the sect. The mine gone, the family bruised but breathing, and Mei Lian somewhere up ahead at Shaoxuan, still owing me a conversation. The road tried to kill me exactly once. On the second day out, 12+ riders from the Qi and Li families caught up with me, elites, 8th and 9th level, sent to a lonely stretch where no clan chief and no Jiang Huimei would ever see how it ended. They'd done their homework too. They'd worked out that my white-haired trump card couldn't last, and they'd brought enough bodies to wait it out and then grind me flat. We're going to carry your head back to your grandfather's gate, the leader called, grinning. Give the old man something to look at. They had not accounted for one small update. I no longer needed the trump card for people this soft. I dropped off my horse straight into the middle of them. The 100 refinement swordplay does its favorite thing when a fight runs long. It gets faster and faster and faster. By the time it wound down, there was a road full of the Qi and Li family's finest, and one leader's head rolling to a slow stop in the dust, still wearing most of its grin. I cleaned my sword, climbed back on the horse, and kept riding. Some days are just like that. 2 days later, I reached the Shaoxuan sect, a whole range of mountains with a stone tablet at the foot, and walked in a nobody among nobodies to get tested. First test was your spiritual root. Basically, your talent. You put a hand on a crystal, the crystal glows to show what you've got. The kids ahead of me lit it up in various grades. I put my hand on it, and the crystal did precisely nothing. I tried again. Nothing. The examiner frowned, wrote me off as a broken root, worthless, and told me to go home. Which was a problem, because I am literally the only chaos holy body in the world, and apparently that reads to a talent crystal as a pebble. Too much, or too strange, or too far off the chart to register at all. Wonderful. My cheat was so good it looped all the way back around to looking like nothing, so I did the sensible thing. I took 10 mid-grade spirit stones, left over from the Black Bear vault, and pressed them into the examiner's hand. His whole face rearranged itself. Suddenly, I had a low-grade spiritual root, just enough for the miscellaneous service yard, which is the sect's basement, the servant's wing, where the talentless scrub floors and get culled off the bottom of the rankings every month. Not glamorous, but inside. And inside was all I needed. I love doing business with smart people, the examiner said warmly, and down to the basement I went. A manager named Guan Yong got assigned to keep an eye on me, on somebody's quiet instructions, which told me someone up top was already tracking the Li boy. He warned me about the local tyrant, a guy named Xiaopeng, #1 thug of the miscellaneous yard, protected by a strong younger brother up in the outer sect. Whatever you do, he said, don't provoke Xiaopeng. I lasted about an hour before I provoked Xiaopeng. It wasn't even on purpose. I went to the stables for a mount, and the stable keeper, one of Xiaopeng's boys, decided a connection hire like me didn't rate a horse and told me to get lost. I tried talking to him nicely. He wasn't in the market for nicely, so I put him to sleep with one punch, took the horse I'd politely asked for, and rode off, while behind me a freshly broken nose swore revenge. Welcome to the sect. The miscellaneous yard paid 1 low-grade spirit stone a day, which is an insult, so I went to the mission hall and took the worst job on the wall. Suppress the bandits of Niuxin Mountain. Several disciples had taken it before me and simply never come back. The elder tried to talk me out of it, but it paid 1,000 points and, more importantly, a high-grade footwork technique, and I badly needed footwork, so I signed. Niuxin Mountain turned out to be one enormous mountain and no obvious bandits, so I did the efficient thing. I lay down on a rock in plain sight, piled my valuables around me, and took a nap as bait. Inside the hour, a few bandits crept down to rob the sleeping idiot, and I relieved them of their heads and their information. There was a village on the peak, they said. 200 strong, and the chief was hosting a wedding that very day, so I went up to watch, and the bride they dragged out in red, hands bound, tears cutting down her face, was Lin Qing. She'd been ambushed the moment she left Qingshan City, probably by the Qi family, and woken up here, about to be married by force to a mountain of a bandit chief. The matron was chanting the ceremony, pressing Lin Qing's head down through the bows, and Lin Qing was staring at the floor like the floor was the last thing she'd ever see. I don't have many lines I won't cross. That is one of them. By the time anyone in that hall clocked a shadow moving, the matron was down and Lin Qing was outside the village in my arms. How are you even here? I asked. She sobbed out the ambush story. I cut her ropes, put the mission map in her hands, and pointed her at the sect. Go, it's about to get loud. It got loud. The bandit chief turned out to be a full samurai realm, which finally explained where all the missing disciples had gone, and his first axe blow caught me clean and knocked me back a dozen steps, arms ringing to the bone. He grinned, certain he'd found another easy meal. You should have stayed a servant boy, he said, hefting the axe onto his shoulder. Down here, everybody feeds the mountain sooner or later, so I fed him to it instead. I lit the chaotic void-piercing art, white hair snapping loose, and 3 sword shadows later the chief and his whole village were a closed matter. Then the weakness rolled over me like a dropped curtain, and I nearly went face first into the dirt, because that is the toll, every single time, and I was beginning to genuinely resent it. The stronghold was almost worthless, 1 spirit ginseng and 100 stones, except the chief had apparently blown his entire life savings on that ginseng to force his own breakthrough, and I ate it instead and broke through on his dime. Fitting. Then I spent 2 days finishing the job, learning the new footwork on live monsters, and by the end, I was caked head to toe in dried black monster gunk and smelled like a lost battle. So I found a clear river, stripped off, and jumped in to wash. And that is when a woman surfaced directly underneath me. She'd been bathing on the far side, and I came down right where she came up, and we both went under in a tangle. I grabbed for anything to keep from drowning, got a fistful of somebody's arm and a handful of hair, and got, in return, a palm strike full of cold energy that launched me out of the water and most of the way into the trees. That absolute animal! A furious, deeply embarrassed voice shouted behind me. I did not stop to introduce myself. I grabbed some leaves, grabbed what was left of my dignity, and got out of there, and it wasn't until much later that I learned 2 things. 1, her name was Jiang Meili. 2, she was the #1 beauty of the entire Xiaoxuan sect, and she was the daughter I'd promised her mother I would look out for. I'd made a spectacular first impression. She remembered my scent. She would know me anywhere. I decided the smart play was to avoid her for the rest of my natural life. That plan lasted about a week. The stable keeper came back with friends, cornered me, and ran the whole "do you know who we are" routine. They were Xiaopeng's people. I put all of them on the ground and made them fix the door they'd broken on the way in, which felt fair. Then I actually got to work. I had that new footwork now, the green bamboo shadowless step, and I pushed it to a solid level in 5 days, which the manuals swore should take 2 years. And I found a place called the 100 Refinements Pavilion, where the spiritual energy pooled thick, and I parked myself in it and climbed to martial artist 8th level while I was at it. The basement was, honestly, a great place to get strong if you could tolerate the neighbors. The neighbors could not tolerate me. Xiaopeng himself finally showed up to put the connection hire in his place, and Guanyang had to step between us to stop it. Xiaopeng left promising to kill me during the coming assessment, which was the monthly cull, and this time the rules had turned brutal. Everyone was on edge. The assessment was a cave. Get in, get through, get out before time runs out, or you're expelled. Top 3 go straight up to the outer sect. Xiaopeng's people opened early. A 9th level killer named Lin Ye stepped out of the dark to block me 100 meters in. Very confident, very chatty, wanted me to know his name so I'd know who'd killed me. I'm asking your name for your own sake, I said, so someone knows what to carve on the memorial stone. He lunged. His knife never arrived. His head did leave though, and I kept walking. The cave got interesting after that. It filled up with bronze guardians, hard as anvils and swinging like them, and disciples everywhere were getting pinned and stuck. I just walked straight through, and any bronze figure in my way got launched off the black gold sword in a fountain of sparks. And here's the thing. Once I was clearing the road, the smart disciples worked out that the winning strategy was to walk directly behind me. So I picked up a parade. By the time I reached the exit, I had half the assessment trailing along in my wake like ducklings. Xiaopeng was waiting at the mouth of the cave to finish me, sword out, grinning like a man who'd already collected his winnings. Then he got a look at the crowd filing in at my back, dozens of witnesses he had specifically planned to do this without, and the grin developed a crack. You, he said, recovering. You really think a basement rat with a stolen antique walks out of here? My brother is an outer sect legend. I'm holding a profound rank martial skill. What have you got? A dependable audience, I said, tipping my head at the ducklings. Say hi, everyone. He came at me with the martial skill, and I'll give him this much. It was a genuine grade above anything I owned, flames skittering down the blade, fast and vicious. For about 3 exchanges, it even looked like a contest. Then I stopped dancing and started using the one thing the black gold sword does better than any weapon in the world, which is weigh an absolute ton. Every time our blades met, his whole arm shuddered and his footing slid, and that pretty profound rank technique got a little less pretty. Clang, clang, clang. His flames guttered. A hairline crack opened in his blade, then a spiderweb of them. That's the trouble with a borrowed technique, I told him, over his failing guard. You never learn to bleed for it. His blade shattered. So did the last of his nerve. He went down in front of the exact captive audience he'd meant to leave me without, and I stepped over the pieces of him and strolled out of the cave into the daylight. The elder running it checked the time and told me, a little stunned, that I'd come in first. Then Guanyang came tumbling out behind me for second, and then the ducklings poured out one after another, almost nobody eliminated, which had apparently never once happened in the entire history of the miscellaneous yard. Guanyang grabbed my hands, close to tears, swore lifelong loyalty, and offered to take me somewhere fun to celebrate, a place with, in his words, a great many beautiful women. I passed. He was crushed. Good man, though. Genuinely. 2 of us up into the outer sect. And Xiaopeng, unfortunately for me, had a brother waiting there. The outer sect was nicer than the basement, and it came with a fresh enemy waiting at the gate, Xiaoli, Xiaopeng's younger brother, and I have to tell you, they looked nothing alike, which raised questions I kept to myself. He was Samurai 5th level, one of the 3 strongest disciples in the whole outer sect, and he'd already been half adopted by an inner sect elder named Qin Shan. He'd heard I killed his brother, and he wanted me to understand I was a walking dead man. I was 7 realms below him. 7. When I mentioned, out loud, that I intended to kill him too, an elder named Wei Long, the same recruiter from my hometown exam, physically stepped between us and asked whether I'd lost my mind. Then he did the math on how fast I'd been climbing, went a little pale, and revised his advice. Place top 3 in the coming outer sect great competition, he said. That puts you in the inner sect with a master of your own, and then even Qin Shan can't casually kill you. The great competition was 2 months out. Xiaoli promised me a grave. I promised to close 7 realms in 8 weeks. Nobody within earshot believed me except, quietly, me. To pull it off, I needed a sword technique called Taiyin swordplay. Profound rank, high grade, strong enough at completion to rival techniques 2 whole tiers above it. It cost 20,000 points. It required condensing something called a yin pearl, and nobody in the entire history of the sect had ever actually managed to cultivate it. Naturally, I wanted it that afternoon. 20,000 points is a lot of points. So I signed up for the 2 deadliest missions on the board, 10,000 each. And then, because those would take time, I invented a side business. I sat down with paper and ink and drew up a little pamphlet. a cheeky self-improvement guide, cultivation tips we'll call them, of a somewhat scandalous and extremely practical nature, the sort of thing nobody would admit to wanting and everybody secretly did. I titled it The Youth Cultivation Manual, signed it with a pen name, and set out a stall. Reader, it sold out in minutes. Grown cultivators came sprinting back for the sequel with the wild eyes of addicts. Word tore across the whole outer sect like a grease fire. I made 3,300 points in a single day, drawing crude little pamphlets, and I very nearly quit the mission business entirely. I spent the profits on 11 bottles of a healing tonic called 8 Treasures Elixir, because I had a strong feeling those 2 death missions were about to earn their names. For a brief, glorious window, I was the sect's most successful and least respectable author. We'll come back to that. It causes me trouble later. Spectacular trouble. The first death mission was a team job. Wipe out a nest of demonic cultivators. And the team I got handed was a masterclass in the range of human quality. There was Lin Qing, who lit up the second she saw me, thanked me all over again for the bandit village, and had clearly decided somewhere along the way that I personally hung the moon. There was Zhu Qiang, a solid, decent guy who took me at face value. And there was Zhou Liang, a samurai second level who looked at my low realm the way you'd look at something stuck to his shoe and made very sure I knew he expected me to get everyone killed. We teleported out to a small village, and the village was a graveyard. Bodies in the doorways, bodies by the well, and barely a drop left in any of them because that was the entire point. Demonic cultivators feed on ordinary people to power their technique. Delightful crowd. And it had happened inside the last day, which meant, I said out loud, that they were very probably still nearby, waiting to ambush the first cultivators dumb enough to come looking, fresh cultivator being the premium product. Nobody asked the basement rat for a theory, Zhou Liang said. Keep your mouth shut and stay behind me. Maybe you live through the day. Right on cue, 20 black-robed figures peeled out of the empty houses and closed a ring around us. You came, their leader breathed, and you could hear the smile in it. We were hoping for cultivators. Villagers run thin. You lot are a feast. I told Lin Qing to hold the center, told Zhu Qiang to guard her, told Zhou Liang to take the leader. And who? Zhou Liang snapped. Put you in charge of… Then the leader charged him, and the question answered itself, and Zhou Liang stopped arguing and started screaming. The other 19 came for me, all of them sneering at the low-level kid stupid enough to stand alone, and one by one they discovered the low-level kid was a ghost with a very heavy sword. I didn't even bother with the white hair. I didn't need it. 17 went down in about the time it takes to tell it, frost and black steel, and by the time the leader tore himself off Zhou Liang to come deal with me, his whole crew was already gone. I took an arm off him for the trouble, and he fled into the trees, short one limb and most of his confidence, through all of which Zhou Liang had done precisely nothing. He'd taken one hit early, decided he'd rather live, and hidden behind a wall, and now that it was over and safe, he came swaggering back out, cradling a scratch, and demanded one of my healing tonics. You're not worth one, I said. He did not care for that. He drew himself up and threatened to go back to the sect and tell everyone I'd harmed a fellow disciple, ruin my name, get me thrown out. I let him talk, and then he made the one mistake that ends every conversation with me exactly the same way. He threatened to send people to my home, to wipe out my entire family, my grandfather included, if I didn't kneel and hand over the medicine. Let me lay out my hierarchy of grudges, so we're clear. Insult me, fine, get in line, try to kill me, take a number, but threaten my grandfather, and the conversation is over. Let me lay out my hierarchy of grudges. Insult me, fine, try to kill me, take a number, but threaten my grandfather, and the conversation is finished. His head was off before he got to the end of the sentence. Zhu Qiang went very still, having just felt the killing intent roll off me, and correctly understood that the harmless-looking junior brother had killed an awful lot of people to earn a feeling like that. He looked at me with something new. Respect, with a healthy thread of fear running through it, which is honestly the best possible mix. The one-armed leader had made one mistake, which was surviving. When the chaos holy body woke up in me, it left a little party trick behind, a way to mark a target and feel roughly where they'd run. Useless most of the time. Perfect right now. We tracked him. Found him dead actually, which was interesting, and then found out why. A larger group of demonic cultivators was busy hunting 2 other Xiaoshuan disciples deeper in the woods, one of whom, I realized with a sinking feeling, was Jiang Meili, the girl from the river, the one who would know my scent anywhere. So I made an executive decision not to personally save her and thereby not get recognized, which I am aware looks bad. Instead, I did something smarter. If the demons were all out hunting, their nest was sitting undefended, so we robbed it blind. The cave was crammed with treasure stolen from everyone those cultivators had ever killed. Heaps of spirit stones, rare materials, and one small black bead giving off a cold so pure it frosted the ground around it. Zhu Qiang nearly fell over. It was a mysterious yin pearl, the exact impossible ingredient the Tai Yin swordplay demanded, the thing nobody in the sect's history had ever laid hands on, sitting in a demon's loot pile like a dropped coin. We shattered every spirit stone in the cave and cultivated right there in the fog of loose energy, which Zhu Qiang called the single most decadent thing he'd ever done. And he was right, and I absorbed most of it, because the chaos holy body drinks like a sinkhole. I broke through 2 levels, all the way to warrior. Zhu Qiang and Lin Qing broke through on my leftovers and forgave me for hogging instantly. I did not that day meet Jiang Meili. But her jealous senior brother Gao Xing, being rescued right alongside her, got a very good look at exactly which nameless nobody kept turning up in orbit around the woman he'd privately decided was his. He filed me away for later. Everyone in this story files me away for later. It's becoming a theme. The second death mission was to kill 1,000 Tier 2 monsters, which is exactly as tedious as it sounds, so I'll spare you the middle. Half a month, sword in one hand, cauldron working overtime, monster meat for every meal, and by the end I'd bulked up, climbed, and personally thinned out most of the local wildlife. The last monster on the list was not tedious, it was a giant flying fish. I found it in an icy pool at the foot of a mountain, and when it burst out of the water it was the size of a house, all black scales and whiskers, and my first sword strike barely scratched it. Then it spat bubbles, pretty little transparent bubbles, and when they popped the whole forest flash froze, trees to ice, ground to snow. Then it filled the air with hundreds at once, and I did the math on hundreds of flash freezes going off around me and arrived at dead. So I climbed into my cooking pot. I mean that literally. I dove inside the chaos cauldron and slammed the lid, and the whole forest turned into a sculpture garden around me, and when I peeked back out, I was the one warm thing in a world of ice. Genius. Except for one detail. There was now a crack running along the cauldron that hadn't been there before. That was the day I learned the bad news the dying old ghost never got to finish. The chaos cauldron was broken. It was missing 12 pieces, scattered who knows where, and every hard hit it took brought it a step closer to shattering for good. And if it shattered, judging by the look on my own face, so did I. But the cauldron had one more trick left. It started drinking the fish's freezing breath, and out of the spout came drops of white liquid, cold as deep winter, and when I swallowed them, the yin pearl I'd been struggling to condense finally caught and grew. The more the fish attacked, the more the cauldron ate, and the bigger my pearl swelled. The fish figured out far too late that it wasn't fighting me, it was catering my breakthrough. By the end, it was the size of my palm and thrashing, and my yin pearl was the size of a fist. The liquid, for the record, tasted faintly of ice cream. Best mission I ever pulled. I picked up the exhausted little fish, thanked it for the growth spurt, and let it go. It looked up at me with what I swear were tears in its eyes. Then it spat a jet of water directly into my face and dove. Ungrateful. I stood there dripping, deeply insulted, freshly outpettied by a koi. I turned in both death missions, which had the elders staring at me like I'd walked back from the moon, collected my 20,000 points, and bought the Tai Yin swordplay. The clerk warned me nobody had ever managed to condense the yin pearl. I told him I'd already done it, and left him sputtering. Then I found out fame has a downside. My little pamphlet had, in my absence, conquered the entire outer sect. Which meant that as I walked back, half the disciples were pointing at me. The women glared and muttered lecher and degenerate, having decided a man who could write such a thing must have done unspeakable research. The men, meanwhile, treated me like a returning war hero. Turned out my most devoted readers were all the spoiled rich sons of inner sect elders, slumming it down here, every one of them backed by somebody powerful. My scandalous little side hustle had accidentally bought me an army. I needed the army right away, because the news waiting for me was bad. Lin Qing had been abducted and Zhu Qiang beaten, both by a woman named Zhou Ping, Zhou Liang's older sister. Come hunting for the brother I'd separated from his head. I could have charged in alone. But she had a real background and a 4th-level realm, and I had something better than a sword for this particular job. I had, thanks to my terrible pamphlet, a battalion of the most well-connected spoiled sons in the entire sect, every one of them backed by an inner sect elder, and every one of them desperate to stay in my good graces for the next chapter. Boys, I said, who wants Volume 4 early? They would have marched me into a volcano. We rolled up to Zhou Ping's door as a mob, and she came out swinging her connections around, threatening this elder and that faction and what her people would do to anyone who crossed her. And then she got a good look at exactly whose sons were standing behind me, cracking their knuckles, and did the fastest political math of her life. Her connections were real. Theirs were realer. It was not close. She handed Lin Qing back, bruised and pale and shaking. I gave Zhou Ping one clean slap for every mark on that girl, handed Lin Qing a bottle of tonic and healed Zhu Qiang, and told her that if that particular gossip ever came within shouting distance of her again, she had an entire fan club on standby. Zhou Ping swore revenge at the great competition, which, sure, get in line, we've been over how that ends. Then I went to train. There was a secret realm inside the sect, an ice and fire place where the energy ran thick enough to soak your clothes, and the only disciple who could sit in the violent middle of it was, supposedly, Xiao Li. I walked to the middle and sat down, and the chaos holy body found the violent energy extremely comfortable, thank you, and 8 days later I came out at Samurai 4th level with the tie-in swordplay at a beginner's grasp. Xiao Li, meanwhile, had climbed to Samurai 6th. The gap was closing, just not from the direction he was watching. I'd barely toweled the koi water off when Lin Qing found me with a letter, and the letter was a gut punch. Her father had sent it before Qingshan City went dark. The Qi and Li families had sealed the whole city off, moving against the Li family for real, and this time it was big enough that even Jiang Huimei couldn't hold it back. I didn't finish reading. I was already running for the teleporter. The gates couldn't take me all the way home, so I rode the last stretch on a rented spirit beast, and just outside the city I passed a filthy, wild-haired old man standing in the middle of the road. Most people in this world blow straight past beggars. I was in a hurry and I still slowed down, said excuse me, asked him politely to step aside. He looked at me for a long moment, told me not to go in, that the city had changed. I told him my family was in there. He sighed and made way. Remember him. He remembers me. Qingshan's gates were sealed and guarded by Qi and Li men who recognized me and made the mistake of charging. I came off the spirit beast through the middle of them, and then I put the black gold sword through the city gate itself and split it clean in half, and walked into my hometown over the pieces. The Li estate was surrounded, bodies on the ground, most of them ours. Jiang Huimei stood between the wolves and my hurt grandfather, and in front of her was someone new. A fine-robed young man from the capital named Wei Kun of the Xiong family, come as a favor for some inner sect genius named Wang Min, and he was threatening to have Jiang Huimei stripped of the treasure pavilion through palace connections if she didn't step aside and let the Li family die. My grandfather saw me and did what he always does, told me to run. I did not run. With me here, I said, walking out of the smoke. Nobody destroys the Li family. I'd grown a lot since these two clan chiefs last got a good look at me. Wang Lei sneered that the little trash had come home just in time to die alongside his family, and the two of them came at me together, two grown masters double-teaming a single junior, which is the kind of thing you only ever do when you are afraid. They were right to be afraid. I spun the yin pearl, poured every drop of extreme cold I had into the black gold sword, and swung once. One swing. Frost detonated outward, and Wang Lei and Chen Bo, two clan chiefs who'd hunted my family across a whole city, froze into statues where they stood, mid-sneer, and then came apart into glittering powder and blew away on the morning wind. Both of them, the two families that had spent months trying to erase mine, gone between one breath and the next. The whole courtyard went silent. Wei Kun, capital genius, was not silent for long. He decided the country trash needed a personal lesson, and he charged. I baited him in close, let him believe he had me, lit the chaotic void-piercing art at the last possible second, and swallowed him whole in a burst of black cold. Not even bones left over. Fitting, I thought, for a man who'd traveled all this way to wipe out my family as a favor to a friend. And that, of course, was when the real problem stepped forward. Wei Kun had a bodyguard, an old man at the Martial Shifu realm, which in this small dynasty is very nearly the top of the entire food chain, and he was furious, and my one real trump card had already burned itself hollow. I had nothing left in the tank. His palm came down at my head like a falling roof, and I could not dodge it, and in the half second I had, I made my peace with it. If I was going down, I was going to take a strip of skin off him on the way out, so that somewhere down the years he'd still remember the boy who marked him. His palm never landed. A withered hand caught the Martial Shifu's wrist out of nowhere, and with one lazy slap sent a top-tier expert flying, his cultivation core shattered, a cripple before he touched the ground. And I looked up along that withered arm into the face of the filthy old man from the road. Jiang Huimei went white and bowed so fast she nearly folded in half, because the wild-haired beggar I'd been polite to on the road was Xu Guang, the sect Shifu of the entire Shaoxuan sect. He looked down at me, half dead and baffled, and grinned, and handed me a bottle of red medicine that made my best tonic look like tap water. "Drink," he said. "This one's more your size." I drank. And I began, slowly, to understand that I had just been adopted by a problem much larger than the two families I'd melted. Xu Guang came home with us. He sat at my grandfather's table in his beggar rags, ate our food, and told me why he'd saved me. Partly because I was talented, he said, and a Shaoxuan disciple who could survive a Martial Shifu's palm was a rare thing worth keeping. but mostly, and he admitted this cheerfully when I called him on it, because he had a use for me. There were, he explained, countless sects in the world. The strongest were the 4 great sects, and every 10 years they held a 4-sect competition. And the Shaoshuan sect, my sect, was dead last, and had been for years, and if we came dead last one more time, we'd be dropped out of the 4 great sects entirely, cut off from resources, and left to slowly die. He wanted me to win it. In 6 months, I told him he was badly overestimating a guy who was still an outer sect nobody. He told me he trusted his own eyes, and when I handed him some green potion I'd whipped up on the side, refined out of a few spirit plants in the chaos cauldron, his own eyes nearly fell out of his head. Because the cauldron doesn't just juice monster cores, it refines spirit plants into potions so pure it beats top grade, purer than anything a real alchemist alive could make. I'd been sitting on a money printer and using it to make between meal snacks. I obviously could not explain the divine artifact hidden in my chest, so I did the thing I do. I lied, said I'd slipped into some kind of trance while brewing and woken up with the potion already finished. Xu Guang, who happened to be a master alchemist himself, bought it because gifted brewers really do stumble into lucky trances now and then he got a gleam in his eye and asked if I'd be his disciple. I said I didn't know how to make potions. He said a man who could brew that without knowing how was born for it. I said it sounded like a lot of work, and I'd pass. And then my grandfather kicked me in the back of the knee, so I dropped into a kneel, announced that his grandson gratefully accepted, and that was that. I had a master, the sect Shifu in fact, his only disciple apparently. There's a gift when you take a master, I said, already holding out my hand. Xu Guang laughed, muttered that his apprentice was no pushover either, and put a pink potion in my palm to help me train for the competition. Then he told me that if I ever became a real apothecary, it could someday lift the whole Li family into a great clan. That old man saw straight through me to the one thing I actually wanted, which was my family safe. I let him believe his sales pitch had worked. It had absolutely worked. Oh, and the cauldron. I learned that day it needed feeding. Pour in mid-grade spirit stones and it slowly wins back its shine. 50 of them for a single sliver of glow, which is a deranged exchange rate, and I had maybe a few hundred stones to my name after wiping out 2 entire families. So repairing the one thing keeping me alive was going to be the single most expensive hobby in the world. Wonderful. Add it to the pile. The pink potion Xu Guang gave me pushed me to Samurai 5th level, and for the first time I understood what real resources could do for a cultivator. Then I went back to the sect for the great competition. The morning of it, I stepped out of my cave and looked up at a clear blue sky, and for a second I saw her in it, Sun Xiu Ying. Pale blue hair, that morning light smile, waiting somewhere I still couldn't find, counting down 2 years I was burning through faster than I liked. Wait for me, I told the sky, quietly, and I didn't reach for a joke to cover it. I'm coming to the Tai Xuan sect, I promised. Then I went to go win a tournament. 200 disciples in the outer sect great competition and a whole row of inner sect elders had come down to scout because Xiao Li was fighting and everyone wanted a look. Qin Shan was up there, and standing behind Qin Shan as his prized new disciple was Mei Lian, who had walked straight into the inner sect while I'd been scrubbing floors in the basement. Small world, getting smaller. I drew lot number 1. Then I drew it again. And again. I drew number 1 so many times, I started to suspect Wei Long of rigging it purely to watch me suffer. The thing is, I almost never had to fight, because my opponents kept surrendering. My very first real match, an undefeated superfan of the youth cultivation manual named Bai Mei walked onto the platform, leaned in, sincerely begged me to please hurry up with Chapter 5, and then loudly forfeited and wandered off, to the visible fury of his father, an inner sect elder. I advanced without drawing my sword. There was one memorable exception. A man so enormously fat I genuinely could not locate his eyes, whose entire technique was to sit there and reflect damage back at whoever hit him. I punched him. My fist bounced. He looked delighted. So I put spiritual energy into a kick and sent his whole reflective bulk sailing up over the arena like a very round comet. He came down somewhere in the cheap seats. The crowd was speechless. Honestly, so was I. Points, though. Round after round I advanced, sometimes by sword, mostly because grown prodigies took one look at me and suddenly remembered they had somewhere else to be. And then I finally drew Zhou Ping. She'd sold everything she owned to force herself up to Samurai 5th level for this, purely to avenge her brother. She came at me screaming, sword loaded with everything she had. I caught the blade between 2 fingers. She had just enough time to look at her stopped sword, look at my face, and understand. Then one strike, and Zhou Liang's sister went off to keep him company, and the arena made that sound again, the one where 200 people revised their estimate of me all at once, which left the final, Li Wei against Xiao Li. The strongest disciple in the recorded history of the outer sect, Samurai 6th level, a full realm over me, and a man who'd been promising me a grave every single time we passed in a hallway for 2 straight months. Up in the elders' seats, Qin Shan leaned forward because this was supposed to be his golden boy's coronation the moment he showed the whole inner sect what a prize he'd claimed for himself. You should have run when you had the chance, Xiaoli said, drawing his sword. My brother was weak. I am not. There's no cave trick here, no crowd to hide in, no luck left to spend, just you and the gap between us. You're probably right, I said. So let's not drag it out. One move, yours or mine. He did not care for that at all. His aura roared up, samurai 6th level, the pressure of it flattening the front rows into their seats, and he swung with absolutely everything he had, 2 months of promised murder riding the blade. I let the cold off the yin pearl flood up into the black gold sword, and I met his sword exactly once. When the energy cleared, Xiaoli was standing in the precise pose he'd swung in. Sword raised, mid-shout, frozen solid, a statue of a man caught in the best strike of his life. I tapped the platform with my sword, the little tremor ran up through him, and the strongest disciple the outer sect had ever produced came apart in a soft fall of ice. First place. From the basement to first place in the outer sect great competition in front of every inner elder who'd come to watch somebody else. Up in the stands, Qinshan looked like he'd bitten a lemon, and Mei Lian, standing behind him, watched the boy she'd left to die in a cave turn a living legend into snowflakes, and for once had absolutely nothing to say. First place came with a stampede. Every inner sect elder who'd come to scout Xiaoli now wanted the guy who'd frozen him instead, and they descended on me throwing offers, resources, spirit stones. One of them offered me a courtyard full of pretty female disciples, which no. Can I just be everyone's disciple? I asked, perfectly serious. And switch masters every day depending on who's offering the best deal that morning? That put a stop to it. I have never seen a group of dignified elders look so personally betrayed. Then an old man wandered over, stroking his beard, and informed me I'd already been claimed by the medicine refining pavilion. Shu Guang's doing, since I technically agreed to be an apothecary. I asked what the perks were. He said none. I said hard pass. He mentioned, very gently, that this was the sect Shifu's wish. And the sect Shifu seemed easygoing, but was in fact ruthless, and I remembered the cripple back home and rediscovered my lifelong passion for alchemy on the spot. The medicine refining pavilion turned out to be exactly where I'd been trying not to end up because it was staffed and beautified by one specific person, Zhang Meili, the river. #1 beauty of the sect, running the very talent test I now had to take. I kept my head down, mumbled my name, turned my back to her, and put my hand on the crystal. It exploded, not glowed, exploded, cracked clean down the middle and threw sparks across the room. The whole line of waiting disciples flinched. That has never happened, Zhang Meili said, staring. They fetched a second crystal. I put my hand on it. It also exploded. Turns out a chaos holy body reads to a talent crystal as either nothing at all or violently too much, and today, of all the days, it had chosen too much. Zhang Meili drifted closer, sniffing the air with a small frown. You smell so familiar, she murmured. Have we? Nope, I said to the wall, praying to every god I could name and refusing to turn around. First time here. Definitely never met. Clearly no talent, so I'll just be going. I got shoved off onto a teacher named Fang Yuan, a third-grade alchemist who took one look at the talentless connection hire whose crystal had just detonated twice and decided to hate me with his entire heart. That lasted right up until I made a potion. He gave the newcomers an hour to study a first-grade recipe. I read it once, walked into the refining room, and came out with a finished first-grade potion on my first attempt. Then I went back in and made a whole batch, half of them top-grade, which is not supposed to be physically possible for a beginner. Fang Yuan looked at the top-grade vials in my hands, looked at me, looked at the vials again, and something behind his eyes quietly broke and rebuilt itself into worship. By that same afternoon, I was a certified second-grade alchemist, a rank that normally eats years out of a person's life. And this time, for once, I earned it with real skill instead of the cauldron, because the cauldron had to stay a secret. My teacher started looking at me like a small miracle he was afraid to touch in case he smudged it. Zhang Meili, unfortunately, got assigned to keep an eye on me, and she had figured it out. She cornered me, leaned in close, and asked in a sweet little voice how the river had treated me. I said I had no idea what she meant. She asked if I thought her legs were pretty. I said, without thinking, extremely, and then spent 10 minutes climbing back out of that hole. She was furious and blushing, and I slowly realized not actually planning to kill me, which in this world counts as flirting. She also handed me the map of what came next. To reach the 4-sect competition, I had to make the heavenly ranking, the top 20 disciples of the entire inner sect. And the fast road up was a place called the Xuan Valley Secret Realm, a killing field at the center of the whole dynasty, where the sects sent their disciples to hunt each other for points. Kill an enemy disciple, take their points, climb. Jiang Meili herself sat 10th on that board, at Martial Shifu 5th level, a full realm above me, and she laid it all out like it should scare me. It did not scare me, it sounded like exactly my kind of place. On my way out, I ran into Wang Min, inner sect genius, ally of the Xiong family, the very man Wei Kun had died doing a favor for, and he had his hands all over Mei Lian, who had apparently traded up from the dead brother to the live cousin without missing so much as a step. Li Wei. Wang Min looked me up and down and smirked. So the trash finally crawled up into the inner sect. Stay behind these walls, little rat. Because the day you set foot outside them, I'll be waiting and there won't be a crowd around to save you. Your cousin said almost exactly that, I said. Right before I split him in two. It runs in the family, apparently. So does the taste. I glanced at Mei Lian, draped over his arm. Word of advice, everything you're holding there is second-hand. My leftovers, by way of your dead cousin. I'd wash my hands after. Wang Min's smirk cracked straight down the middle. Mei Lian went stiff, and that one little seed of doubt, once planted, was going to itch at him for a solid week, which was the entire point of planting it. And while he stood there stewing, Jiang Meili strolled up out of absolutely nowhere, plucked the alchemist badge out of my hand, pinned it to my chest like a doting wife, wrapped herself around my arm, and beamed up at me, purely and specifically to watch Mei Lian's face collapse next to her. The #1 beauty of the entire sect, standing next to Mei Lian, was not a close contest, and everybody in that corridor ran the comparison out loud, at volume. Then she hauled me off around a corner, dropped the loving wife act like a coat, and calmly promised to settle our river business at a time of her own choosing. And from the shadows, Gao Sheng watched every second of it with murder sitting behind his eyes, because he had decided long ago that Jiang Meili was his, and here was some basement nobody getting the doting wife treatment in front of the whole inner sect. I filed him away for later. It's a whole thing, I've mentioned. Then I left for the Xuan Valley to go kill my way onto the heavenly ranking. Xuan Valley was less a secret realm and more a war zone with a gift shop. 100,000 disciples from every sect in the dynasty, a storage ring on every wrist counting your points, and one simple rule. Kill someone from another sect, take their score. Everyone knew everyone else was there to murder them, which made for a very friendly atmosphere. Almost everyone. I got adopted, weirdly, by two genuinely kind Shaoshuan seniors named Luo Fen and Zhou Lei, who took one look at the low-level newcomer and decided to look after me. They fed me rare cultivation fruit off the trees, waved off my thanks, actually cared. In a place built to draw out the worst in people, they were the exception, and I liked them immediately, which in a story like this one is basically a death sentence I was too slow to hear. The first lesson the valley taught me came fast. Luo Fen and Zhou Lei were 7th level, no pushovers, and a 7 Fiend sect disciple decided the three of us looked like an easy score. He swatted both my seniors down before I could blink, left them coughing in the mud, and turned to the low-level tag-along with a grin. Dessert. The fruit, I said. It's with me. He laughed and came at me, and I took his head off in one clean motion and kept walking, and my two seniors sat up in the mud, staring at the newcomer they'd spent the afternoon feeding fruit and quietly shielding, and slowly rebuilt their entire understanding of the day from the ground up. Junior brother, Luo Fen managed. What exactly are you? Hungry mostly, I said. Come on. There's better fruit than this. The valley was buzzing about a legendary weapon called the innate stone sword, nurtured underground for 10,000 years, supposedly about to surface. But the immediate excitement was fruit. Specifically the 1,000-year kind, ripening on one giant ancient tree, valuable enough that a few hundred cultivators were currently killing each other in a swamp over it. Leading the slaughter were the Xiong family twins, Xiong Wuji and Xiong Wufeng, two prodigies working as a matched set. Because of course, the Xiong family was here too. At this point, I was building a collection. I did not fight fair for that fruit. Fighting fair in a swamp full of 100 desperate cultivators is how you become fertilizer. So I let everyone else wear each other down around the tree, and I quietly robbed the winners as they staggered back out. My favorite part of the whole operation was one poor, terrified man I caught clutching a fruit. I pressed the black gold sword to his spine, relieved him of it, and then, when he turned to bolt, told him to go get me another one. He did. Twice. While I sat in the reeds and supervised, There is no bottom to how far a man will go with a cold blade between his shoulders, and when the Xiong twins finally noticed the nobody hoovering up their prize and decided to make it a family matter, I froze them both mid-boast and took everything they'd gathered. I walked out of that swamp with 5,000-year fruits, and I gave 2 of them to Luo Fen and Zhou Lei because they'd been kind to a stranger for no reason, and kindness in Xuan Valley was rare enough to deserve a receipt. And then the cauldron woke up. A streak of light shot across the sky, and the chaos cauldron in my chest started shaking so hard it hurt. Cracks spreading, light pulsing, screaming at me in the only way it could that I needed to chase that light. So I chased it across half the valley, through a mob, through a pack of 7 fiend sect disciples who wanted it too, freezing anyone who got between me and it because I'd worked out what it was. A bronze fragment, one of the 12 missing pieces of my cauldron. I grabbed it. It flew straight into the cauldron and merged. The cracks shrank, the shine came back stronger than ever, and I stood there 1/12 less broken, feeling something close to relief. And then 2 things came out of the cauldron that I was not expecting. The first was a technique. It drifted into my head with no name and a very simple description. 1 strike, and he's dead. The Sword Emperor's ultimate technique. A killing move so absolute I could feel the despair of its long-dead victims just from watching the memory of it. The second thing was a monkey. A golden-furred, blue-faced monkey came flying out of my cauldron, hit the ground rolling, sprang straight up into a fighting stance, and the very first thing it did with 10,000 years of freshly regained freedom was take a swing at my face. Whoa, hey, I got the innate stone sword up between us. Easy, easy. Why are we fighting? I don't even know you. Because you're the reason I've been stuck in a pot, the monkey snarled. Then it paused, looked around at the open sky, sniffed the air, and its whole posture melted. Hold on, am I out? I'm out. Huh. Once we'd firmly established that neither of us was going to murder the other, he explained himself. At length. Because it turned out he had 10,000 years of not talking to make up for, and he intended to make up for all of it immediately. He'd been sealed inside the Chaos Cauldron by the first Chaos Holy Body, my helpful dying ghost. Apparently the cauldron had taken one look at him, ruled that he was a monkey and not a proper human owner, and locked him in the basement, where he'd sat for 100 straight centuries with nothing to do but stew. He was, he informed me proudly, the one who'd been rattling the cauldron this entire time to make me chase the fragment, on account of my being, in his professional and deeply considered opinion, far too dim to have worked it out on my own. You're welcome, by the way, he added. I looked at this ancient, foul-mouthed, magnificently ungrateful primate who had apparently been living rent-free inside my chest cavity, who claimed to be tens of thousands of years old, who told me, without one shred of self-awareness, that he'd first woken up inside a meteor and cracked his way out of the rock after soaking up the essence of the sun and moon for a few thousand years. I am from Earth. I have read that book. I have seen the show. There are several shows. I'm calling you Sun Yuan, I told him. Fine, said the monkey, and that was how I got a partner. He couldn't stay out of the cauldron long, not until it was fully repaired, but while he was around, he taught me the single most important thing I picked up in that whole valley. Sword intent. 9 levels of it, each one making your sword faster and heavier and more inevitable, and I grasped the first level in 10 days flat, which Sun Yuan assured me was embarrassingly slow. Real geniuses do it in 5, don't get a big head. He'd been ordered by the first Chaos Holy Body to keep me humble, because apparently our physique's one flaw is that it makes you insufferable, and the first guy had nearly died of his own ego. I climbed to Samurai 8th level in the same stretch, and I walked out of that fruit swamp with a repaired cauldron, a killing technique, a partner who insulted me around the clock, and a first taste of the thing that would make me genuinely dangerous. Best trip ever, right up until it stopped being. The innate stone sword surfaced deep in the valley, in a temple under a lake, and I ran for it with everyone else. But at the temple gate, I found Luo Fen dying. He'd been run through protecting Zhou Lei. He caught my ankle with the last of his strength, and all he could get out was go, save her, before his hand slid off and his eyes went still. My kind senior, the one who fed a stranger fruit and asked for nothing back, gone on the temple steps. I did not reach for a joke. I closed his eyes, and I went to get his sister. Zhou Lei was pinned deep inside, unconscious, guarded by 7 fiend sect disciples led by the man who'd killed Luo Fen, a piece of work named Hu Bo who talked about it like he'd swatted a fly. He had one of his people raise a blade over her throat. I was too far, boxed out of time, so I picked up Sun Yuan and threw him. Sun Yuan understood instantly. He hit that disciple headfirst like a golden cannonball. The man dropped, and the monkey bounced off unharmed, looking enormously pleased with himself, which bought me the half-second I needed to reach Hu Bo, and I gave him the Sword Emperor's technique, 1 strike, so fast the crowd never saw it happen, and Hu Bo was simply dead. With a line across his throat and a look of confusion he carried to the grave. Rest easy, senior, I said toward the gate where Luo Fen's eyes had finally closed. She's safe. I've got her. Then I tied the unconscious Zhou Lei to my back and went deeper, because the sword was still down there. And so, it turned out, were some familiar faces: Wang Min, Mei Lian, beaten half to pieces, and on their knees, captives of the Mei Shu Hall, the strongest of all 4 great sects, whose golden boy, the holy void young Shifu, was toying with them. And when they saw me, do you know what they did? They tried to sell me. Mei Lian pointed at me and told the Mei Shu Hall genius I was carrying a great treasure. Kill him and take it, please. We're all Xiaoshuan. Save yourselves by throwing me to the wolves. I walked over to her, and right to the very end she was still working an angle. She shrieked at me to hand over my treasure and save my fellow disciples. How could I be so heartless? We were all Xiaoshuan. Surely blood ran thicker than one old grudge. Blood. She wanted to talk to me about blood. You left me bleeding out in a monster mountain, I said, so you could break through a little faster. You looked me in the eye and told me to go die in peace. And now that I'm the only thing standing between you and a Mei Shu Hall blade, all of a sudden, we're family. I slapped her, hard enough to put her down. I hadn't even settled our old account yet, and here you are trying to get me killed a second time in the same lifetime. You are, I'll give you this, consistent. She scrambled backward, and she switched tactics one final time, because switching tactics was the only thing she'd ever truly known how to do. She screamed that she'd report me to the sect, that I would never get away with harming a fellow disciple, that she was walking back to Xiaoshuan and telling everyone what a monster I was. You're not going back anywhere, I said. And one strike, and Mei Lian was finished. I want to tell you how that felt, because it wasn't triumph exactly. The moment she went down, something in me that had been humming since the very first second in that muddy mountain finally went quiet. The old Li Wei's despair, the betrayal I'd woken up inside of, the go die in peace, all of it. Paid. Closed. My soul finally settled the whole way into this body, like the last tenant had finally moved out. I'd kept his promise for him. From here on, the story was just mine. Wang Min begged, I don't leave enemies breathing. He joined her. The holy void, young Shifu actually applauded, decided I was too ruthless to waste, and offered me a job. I countered by asking for the innate stone sword. He declined. So the negotiation ended the way these things do. The temple started coming down right as the sword pulled loose. I sealed it to me with a drop of my own on Sun Yuan's screaming advice, put the young Shifu's head on the floor with the Sword Emperor's technique, and ran out over the crumbling stones with the sword in one hand and Zhou Lei on my back. And then, at the exit, 200 cultivators were waiting for the sword. Word travels fast around a treasure artifact. Every faction that hadn't fought its way into the temple had gathered at the only way out, and they'd run the sensible numbers, which said that one exhausted junior carrying a woman on his back could not possibly cut through 200 people. Hand over the innate stone sword, one of them called, almost friendly, and we'll let you walk out of here. I was running on fumes. I had an unconscious Zhou Lei strapped to my back. There were 200 of them, and one of me. And I want to be very clear that I did not want to do what I did next. But Luo Fen had just died for the woman on my back, and I was not putting her down, and they were not going to let me pass. So I walked into them. Yin Pearl, an innate stone sword, and sword intent. Cold and fast and endless. I stopped counting. I stopped thinking. I just moved. Frost bloomed everywhere the sword passed. The front rank froze and shattered, and the second rank saw what happened to the first and lost their nerve, and it didn't matter, because nerve doesn't outrun sword intent. Half an hour. That's how long it took. Half an hour, and then there was a mountain of the fallen, and one man standing on top of it, breathing hard, a woman still breathing on his back. I didn't stay to admire it. It's not the kind of thing a person admires, but somebody found that field afterward, and nobody knew who'd made it, so the valley gave the ghost a name, the God of Slaughter. Great nickname. Would have preferred to earn it on a full night's sleep. Back at the sect I got dragged, protesting, to a thing called the Sect Tea Party. Once a year the 4 great sects and a few minor ones gather at Hundred Flowers Valley to mingle, show off, and pretend to be friends. There was 1,000-year ginseng as the prize for the sparring, which was the only reason I agreed to go, because I will travel any distance for a quality cultivation snack. The valley was wall-to-wall with beautiful people, and one cold, gorgeous woman named Leng Ruo, ranked among the 2 great beauties of the whole dynasty, alongside Jiang Meili, who came and sat beside me at the party specifically because I was the one man there ignoring her in favor of my dinner. She found that fascinating. I found the roast very good. The sparring was where it turned ugly. A minor but rising outfit called the Leaving Dust sect had come with a purpose, and the purpose had a name. Mohan. A genius they'd brought specifically to humiliate the Xiaoshuan sect in public, because the whole dynasty had written us off as weak and fading, and nothing builds a rising sect's name like stepping on a falling one. He challenged our people and beat them, one after another, and then, to really drive it home, he forced his own breakthrough to Marshal Shifu right there in the ring, mid-fight, put two of our seniors down hard and stood over them twirling his spear. "Is this the famous Shaoxuan sect?" he called to the crowd, delighted with himself. "One of the 4 great sects? I've had harder fights with the kitchen staff. Send up someone who can make me sweat, or just admit what everyone here already knows. You're finished." The Shaoxuan seniors around me sat and took it because he wasn't wrong about the gap, and there's nothing that closes a throat like being publicly, loudly correct. So I got up. I was still only Samurai 8th level, a full realm and change under him, and the entire valley groaned at the sight of the dying sect sending up a kid to get flattened. Mohan looked at my realm and generously offered me a few free moves, so nobody could later claim he'd bullied a child. "You only need to worry about one move," I told him, "and it's going to be mine." He laughed. He was still laughing when I called on the innate stone sword and the sword intent and simply appeared behind him, and his head hit the ground before the laugh had finished leaving it. Same arrogant pose, same open mouth. The whole valley went so quiet you could hear the ginseng grow. The valley went absolutely silent. The leaving dust sect stopped smiling. I collected the 1,000-year ginseng, walked back to my seat, and resumed eating. That was when Leng Ruo leaned over and asked, very carefully, whether I happened to be the god of slaughter everyone was whispering about, the one who killed 200 people carrying a woman on his back. I said I'd never heard of him, which was true, and then when she described what he'd done, I had to admit that, well, I had recently been surrounded by 200 people, and yes, they were now all deceased. The whole party lost its mind. Suddenly I had a fan club. A little girl ran up and asked the god of slaughter for his autograph, so I signed her sleeve. And then 40 more people wanted autographs, and I had to physically flee. Somewhere in the noise, a crowd of 100 Flowers girls decided a man who kills 200 people to save his companion was exactly their type, which is a concerning thing to learn about a demographic. And the Leaving Dust sect, who had a lot of God of Slaughter fans, went very quiet, having just watched their god one-shot their champion at the buffet. I left with a ginseng and a nickname I couldn't shake. My sect, for once, walked out with their heads up. Small wins. My reward for being useful was a mission into a freshly discovered ruin, courtesy of the Pavilion Shifu, who noted that a newly opened ruin hadn't been picked clean yet. He also warned me that word of my innate stone sword had gotten around, and half the world now wanted to relieve me of it. Comforting. The team was 4 people and one obvious problem. 2 brothers, Han Cheng and Han Guang, decent and loyal, who'd defend me all mission, a vain woman named Ye Zi who despised me on principle, and the leader, Xie Jin, a Marshal Shifu 4th level with a smile I did not trust for a single second. The ruin was an ancient battlefield wrapped in white fog, and the fog was the first killer. It ate flesh. Yezi walked into it before anyone could stop her and came out with half her face gone, which was horrifying. And also, in this crowd, karma, with excellent timing. I found the one safe path through, saved the brothers, and pressed on. Inside, I found a corpse. Not just any corpse. A martial ancestor, dead ages ago, still soaked in sword chi so thick it would kill you to absorb it raw. So I did the unraw thing. I dug a hole, climbed in with the body so nobody could see the cauldron, and let the chaos cauldron refine that ancient sword chi into something gentle enough to drink. I came up with sword intent at the 2nd level and a body that broke clean into the Marshal Shifu realm from a hole in the ground, in a dead man's arms. Then the ground opened and dropped me somewhere worse, a giant spider with a human face, 3rd tier monster, steel silk web, and it had just eaten Yezi, which I mention only because it explains why Xie Jin was suddenly alone up top and completely free to show me his real face, and his real face was rotten. "You know, I almost feel bad," Xie Jin said, and the devil chi rolled off him now that he'd stopped bothering to hide it. "You're talented, genuinely, but talent that isn't mine is just a threat that hasn't happened yet. So," he smiled, "nothing personal, junior brother. Well, a little personal. Gao Sheng did ask me to make it hurt." So that was the truth of the man. Xie Jin was a demonic cultivator, a traitor planted deep in the Shaoxuan sect, and he'd been sent on this mission by none other than Gao Sheng himself, to kill me, take my innate stone sword, and drink me dry. He'd brought help. A dozen demon cultivators fanning out into a ring around me, and a hidden Marshal Shifu 7th level named Guo Lei stepping out of the dark, and Xie Jin watching all of it with the smug patience of a man who has already counted his winnings. I froze the spider's web solid, put my sword through its human face, and turned to deal with the traitor. The dozen demons went down like the extras they were. Xie Jin was harder, being an actual Marshal Shifu, so when Guo Lei stepped out of hiding to finish me, I did the only thing left. I lit the chaotic, void-piercing art, went white-haired, and gave the Marshal Shifu 7th level the Sword Emperor's technique, one strike, straight through the middle, and watched a top-tier expert come apart, looking astonished. Then I let the state go, rode out the weakness, walked over to a shaking Ji Jin and reminded him that threatening a man's family and his cauldron in the same afternoon was ambitious. His head came off. The Dragon Brothers, who'd watched all of it, looked at me the way people do once they realize the quiet junior brother is the scariest thing in the room, and became my loyal friends on the spot. Sun Yuan found the real prize deeper in. A blood pool the demons had spent months filling off that battlefield. It was ghastly, and it was potent, and I broke through again the moment I stepped into it. Then I dropped the Chaos Cauldron in, and it drank the whole pool dry, and when I fished it out, every last crack was gone. Fully repaired. For the first time since I woke up in this world, the thing keeping me alive wasn't slowly dying along with me. Sun Yuan screamed the entire time, because I dunked him in the pool too, but that's a private matter between me and the monkey. Back at the sect, the heavenly ranking tournament was starting. Top 20 disciples on a stone tablet, the top 10 of them earning a seat at the 4-sect competition, and Shu Guang had opened it wide. Free challenge, no rules, deaths allowed. Beat someone ranked, take their spot. 2 new faces had come to town for it, both there specifically for me. Wei Ling, the precious daughter of the Xiong family head, and Zhao Hai, ranked 11th. Backed by the Huang family, and behind them, the Mei Shu Hall. The Xiong girl had already made her opening move. She'd lured my friend Han Guang out and crippled him, purely as bait to drag me onto the stage where she could kill me legally. That was a mistake, not yet a fatal one, but a mistake. Zhang Mei Li was ranked 10th. She planned to give up the seat rather than defend it against 100 challengers, which was the smart move, so naturally, I made her a worse-sounding, better offer. Give it to me. I'll hold it. She looked at me the way you'd look at a man who'd just offered to juggle knives blindfolded. You are a martial Shifu 2nd level. Every prodigy on that board is realms above you. They will line up around the arena to kill you. I'm counting on the line, I said. And then Zhao Hai opened his mouth about my family, and the killing intent came off me so hard the front rows flinched back, and I was 3 full steps toward walking over and ending him right there in the stands, ranking be damned, and a small cold hand closed around my wrist. Jiang Mei Li, holding me back. She'd felt what I was about to do and stepped into it without thinking. For a second, neither of us said anything, and something passed between us in that second that neither of us was going to say out loud. Not yet. Then she let go, took a breath, and gave me the spot. Don't die, she said quietly. It would annoy me. Wouldn't dream of it. Then I stood on the platform and let the sect come to me. They came, and they came confident, because a martial Shifu 2nd level holding a top 10 seat is supposed to be a clerical error you correct with your sword. A giant who could inflate his whole body to 10 meters and promise to crush me flat, gone in one kick that folded him right back down to human size. A swordsman a full realm up who told me to savor my last breath, gone in one strike so fast the weaker disciples in the stands swore up and down that I never moved. Another, so sure of himself, so briefly. And another, the crowd went from mocking to uneasy to dead silent in about the space of 5 challengers, and all at once nobody in that arena wanted to be the next name called. Wei Ling went next, and she'd brought a real treasure artifact, the Azure Gang sword, and a great deal of confidence about being 2 realms over me. I let her swing it once, then I broke it. Cut her family treasure in half and put her on the ground. I picked her up by the collar. That first one was for Han Guang, I said, and I hit her, and I meant it. When she snarled that the Xiong family would wipe out the Li family for this, I picked her up again. You really shouldn't have threatened my family. Zhao Hai shouted for me to stop, that I understood the consequences of killing her. I did understand them. I killed her. Anyway, I hate being threatened with my family. I believe I've mentioned that too. Zhao Hai came up furious, martial Shifu 5th level, 3 whole realms above me, a treasure artifact axe in his hands, and a signature move he was extremely proud of. You killed Qian, he said, and the axe lit up along its edge. Do you have the faintest idea what family you just insulted? What stands behind us? You're not just dead. Everyone you've ever spoken a word to is dead. There they were again, the magic words. Earth-splitting slash, he roared, and unloaded the move, a massive axe shadow that cracked the platform 10 meters long and threw dust across the front rows. When it cleared, I was standing exactly where I'd started, the innate stone sword held crosswise in one hand, having caught the best move of his life on the flat of the blade without so much as shifting my feet. The whole arena stopped breathing at once. Was that the whole thing? I asked. Then I stopped playing. I let the cold off the yin pearl loose, and when his next axe shadow met it, the shadow simply froze in the air, and then the ice ran back up the shadow into the handle and up his arms and over the rest of him before he could even think to let go. Zhao Hai became a statue caught mid-swing, and when I tapped the platform with my toe, a soft heap of snow, killed across 3 realms in front of the entire inner sect. That had, they told me, never once happened in the sect's whole history. I was making a habit of never happened. Afterward, Zhang Meili found me, and I gave her the mysterious yin pearl. The one from the fish, the fist-sized one, the exact ingredient she'd hunted for half a year and finally given up on. She refused it, of course, said it was far too precious. I put it in her hand and closed her fingers over it. Your mother asked me to look after you, I said. This is me looking. She went red all the way to her ears. And her jealous senior brother Gao Sheng, ranked #1 on that whole board, watched a nobody hand the #1 beauty, the treasure of her dreams, and hated me with a purity you could have bottled, which was fine. I already knew he'd sent a demon to kill me in a ruin. Gao Sheng and I had a conversation coming. Everything on that board did. The winds came with a bill, the way winds do. Xu Guang pulled me aside and laid it out. The Xiong and Huang family heads were both Marshal Shufu 9th level. The Huang family had the Mei Shu Hall standing behind them, and I had just killed both families' precious children in public. They were coming for the Li family with everything they had, and even he couldn't promise he'd be able to stop them. I needed to get strong, fast, faster than fast. Then he showed me the 4-sect competition roster, and it was humbling. The other 3 sects aces were all Marshal Shifu 9th level. Mei Shu Hall's Chen Yue, a prodigy said to rival the crown prince of the entire dynasty, 100 Flowers Leng Ruo, 7 Fiends Wu Zhen, and Xiao Xuan's single name on that list was Gao Sheng at Marshal Shifu 8th, 1 man against 3 super sects. To close that gap, the sect bet its own future. They opened the profound heart ancient land, a forbidden place built over a dragon vein, and let us cultivate inside a tower where the spiritual energy ran 10 times thick. There was a catch, naturally. The tower crushed you with gravity, floor by floor, and the higher you climbed, the more it hurt. Everyone else tapped out around the 4th floor. I hid inside my cauldron, let it drink the tower's energy straight for me, and walked to the 7th floor, which no disciple in the sect's history had ever reached, and broke 3 realms in 7 days to Marshal Shifu 5th. The commotion of it, whirlpools of energy pouring into the top of the tower, had Xu Guang outside laughing like a lunatic and everyone else gaping at the tower in disbelief. I came out the 7th floor door in rags, having also destroyed my clothes on the way, which is how Zhang Meili confirmed I was in fact the man from the river, since she got a very complete look before I could cover up. She called me an animal and stormed off scarlet, which by our standards was practically a marriage proposal. Then they threw me into a trial tower, 10 floors, and on every floor an enemy that was a copy of me, each one a realm stronger than the last. It is a strange thing fighting your own face. I one-shot my way up through the first 9, watching myself die over and over in slightly better versions, and then I reached floor 10. Floor 10 was me, 3 realms up, with sword intent 1 level higher than mine, and it did not go down in 1 strike. It did not go down at all. For 6 straight days, it beat me black and blue, took me apart and let me heal, and took me apart again, because it knew everything I knew and hit harder while knowing it. Every trick I reached for, it had already discarded because it was me. There is no lonelier fight in the world than the one against a better version of yourself. And then, somewhere in the middle of the 6th day of losing, I stopped trying to outthink a man who shared my every thought, and I simply got faster than him and reversed it and took his head. Sword intent, 3rd level, realm, rock solid, and a very personal, very permanent understanding that the single scariest opponent I would ever face was, apparently, me. On the way to the 4-sect competition, Xu Guang finally told me why any of this mattered to me specifically, because I'd asked him, months back, how to reach the Taishuan sect, and he'd had no idea. But he knew this. Shine at the 4-sect competition, and you get pulled up to represent the whole great Jin dynasty at something called the 10,000 Dynasties War. Shine there, and the great powers of the eastern region notice you. And one of those powers, the Tianshuan sect, was somehow tied to the Taishuan sect, to Sun Shuying. So there it was, the whole ladder. Win here, climb there, and somewhere at the top of it was a cave and a promise and a woman who didn't believe I'd come. My 2 years were burning down. I stopped thinking of the 4-sect competition as a sect obligation and started thinking of it as the next rung home. The competition was held in the Imperial City, several times bigger than my entire home city, run by the royal family of Great Jin. The Crown Prince Li Jin greeted us. #1 young prodigy of the whole dynasty, all charm on the surface and, I'd learn, an absolute cutthroat underneath. His cousin the princess ran a close second. The 7 Fiends sect drew the guest quarters right next to ours, which was the royal family's little joke because our 2 sects had hated each other for generations. Their golden boy, Wu Zhen, started in on us the second we arrived. So this is what's left of the mighty Xiaoshuan sect, he called, looking us over like fruit going soft. A washed-up nobody, a handful of has-beens, and his eyes slid to Zhang Meili, and his voice went oily. Well, at least the scenery's nice. You, beautiful. Come sit with a real sect. I'll show you what a future looks like. Zhang Meili's jaw went tight, and our own #1, Gao Sheng, the strongest name we had, just sat there and took it, silent, swallowed it whole, which I found completely unacceptable. You're too ugly, I said. My senior sister has standards, and you don't clear the bar. Sorry, somebody had to tell you. Wu Jun's head snapped around. What did you just say to me? Say it again. Which part? The ugly part or the standards part? I can go slower. His face went a wonderful color, so I went one better. Also, show some respect when you talk to me. I'm your grandfather. You're my what? Your father's my son. Basic family tree. Keep up, grandson. The whole thing came apart from there, and the entire Xiaoshuan table, who'd been sitting there crushed and humiliated 30 seconds earlier, was suddenly choking down laughter. That was the entire point. You don't win a room like that by being the strongest thing in it. You win it by refusing, out loud, to be small. The prince threw a banquet and everyone brought gifts, and I, being broke, brought nothing. Wu Jun pounced on it, tried to embarrass me in front of the prince for showing up empty-handed to a royal table, so I handed the crown prince a bamboo tube. Inside was a copy of the Youth Cultivation Manual, my pamphlet, and Li Jin opened it, and his breathing changed, and he snapped it shut before his cousin could see, and declared it the finest gift he'd gotten all night. Turns out my scandalous little book had become the single most sought-after piece of contraband in the inner sect, going for 10,000 spirit stones a copy on the black market, written by a mysterious genius, and the mysterious genius was me. The prince became a fan on the spot and publicly roasted Wu Jun for bringing him boring rocks instead. My most disreputable achievement, and it bought me a prince. The Xiong and Huang families tried to have me quietly murdered that same night, a squad of assassins in the dark, which I turned into a squad of corpses without much comment, because at this point people trying to kill me in my off hours was just weather. Then the 4-sect competition opened, round robin. 2 sects at a time, disciple against disciple, and a sect was eliminated the moment its last fighter fell. Bad rules for the undermanned underdog. Very bad rules for Xiaoshuan. Perfect rules for me. Our strategy meeting was short. Everyone wanted to send the weak first and save the strong. I argued the opposite. Send the strong first. Gamble everything. Because if Gao Sheng and I both fell early, we'd lost anyway, so we might as well swing for it. Gao Sheng, to his credit, set aside exactly how much he hated me and agreed. And Xu Guang, up in the private box, bet the sect's entire fortune on me placing against the other sect masters, who thought that was the funniest thing they'd heard all year. Then luck laughed at us. Gao Sheng went up first and drew Chen Yue, the champion, the one prodigy in the whole competition who could stand next to the crown prince. He fought her anyway. He knew he'd lose, and he went all out on principle, for a sect he'd grown up in and genuinely loved, and she took him apart, methodically, until he was down and barely alive with his cultivation core half-wrecked, and before they carried him off, he looked over at our rest area with a face that said, I did what I could, the rest is on you. Let me be honest. I never liked Gao Sheng. He'd sent a demon to kill me in a ruin, but I watched him spend his own body for a sect that had written him off, and I did not crack a single joke about it. Some things you let sit. Then I walked out. Senior brother did his best, I told our shaken rest area, and the killing intent rolling off me made every one of them go quiet. Leave the rest to me. I one-shot the first 7 fiends disciple they sent, and then I said the thing that turned the whole arena into one held breath. I want to challenge everyone, both sects, all of them, alone. The referee had to go ask the emperor whether that was even allowed. It was. So they came. First up, a giant named Bao Hu, all muscle and a warhammer the size of a door, who cheerfully informed me he'd flatten me into a smear on the boards. He swung the hammer. I stepped inside the arc of it, cut the haft in half, and took his head, and because the physics happened to work out that way, and I have a sense of humor, I let it roll all the way across the platform to come to rest, gently, against Wu Jun's boot. Wu Jun did not enjoy that. That was the entire point. Next they sent an assassin. Chu Mei, dressed for distraction, and she was distracting, and she was also faster than my eyes could follow, blinking in and out of sight with a pair of daggers. Old me would have died to that in the first second. But speed isn't silence. Every time she wound up to strike, her killing intent spiked a half-beat early, like a held breath before a shout. So I closed my eyes, stopped chasing her with sight, and just listened for that spike. When it came from my right, I put the innate stone sword through the empty air to my right, and she ran straight onto it wearing a look of pure astonishment. Should have stayed invisible, I told her. Then they stopped playing and sent their old ace. Chen Fong, Marshal Shifu 9th level, a man who had just comprehended saber intent and clearly believed it made him a god walking among toddlers. You have real talent, he said, generous in a victory he had not remotely won. It's a shame to waste it, but I've grasped saber intent. I end this in one stroke. Funny, I said. So do I. He came in on that one stroke, all his shiny new saber intent behind it. I met it with sword intent at the 2nd level, and his face did something complicated because his one strike kill had just been answered and quietly filed away. Then I pushed to the 3rd level, and the complicated face turned into a frightened one, because now he finally understood the size of the gap between us, and understanding it did absolutely nothing to close it. He learned the difference the hard way, which in this line of work is the only way anyone ever learns anything. By then, Wu Zhen couldn't stand it and came up himself, 9th level, concept at the 2nd stage, genuinely strong. We actually fought, the good kind, and when he wouldn't fall, I let the yin pearl loose and froze him solid too. But it cost me. I was running on empty now, breathing hard, right at the edge of everything I had left, which is exactly when Chen Yue stepped onto the platform, fresh, the champion. And she looked at my heaving chest and my shaking sword and offered to spare my life if I'd kneel and join the Mei Shu Hall. Here's a thing about me you should know by now. I am a very good actor, and I had a monkey with a plan. Fake it, Sun Yuan had told me from inside the cauldron. Right before this, let her hit you, sell it, look like a corpse that just hasn't gotten the news yet. And when she stops to gloat, and she will stop to gloat, they always stop to gloat, I'll pour every drop we've been hoarding straight into your dantian. So she swung, and I let her blast me clear across the platform. I coughed up a convincing mouthful, staggered, dropped to one knee, and let my sword arm shake like the last leaf on a dead tree. She relaxed. She got comfortable. She lowered her guard and started to monologue, because champions cannot resist a captive audience and a dying man. And she told me at length how a genius is nothing once he's a corpse, how my talent had been real but tragically wasted, how the Mei Shu Hall would remember me fondly as a cautionary tale for arrogant children. And underneath all of that, right on schedule, Sun Yuan opened the tap. Every scrap of energy I'd been quietly stockpiling in the chaos cauldron for exactly this moment came flooding up my spine, and there, at the absolute rock bottom of my fake collapse, in front of 10,000 witnesses and one monologuing champion, I broke through to Martial Shifu, 6th level mid-breath. By the time she felt my aura surge under her nose, it was already far, far too late. My sword split into a storm of shadows that swallowed hers whole and closed over her like a tide. The champion. The one prodigy in that entire arena nobody believed I could so much as scratch. Undone by bad acting and a hidden cooking pot. The game needs brains too, I told her, crouching down as she went still. I'm not just stronger than you, I'm smarter. So what exactly ever made you think you could win? Then I stood up and looked at the rest areas of both super sects. Who's next? I said. Nobody was next. Both sects, out of champions and out of nerve, forfeited rather than feed me another body. Leng Ruo of 100 Flowers looked at all of it, decided she'd rather not, and simply conceded first place, which made the Xiaoshuan sect dead last for as long as anyone could remember, the winner of the 4-sect competition. One boy from a basement carried an entire dying sect to the top. Xu Guang, up in his box, collected a bet that made him rich and laughed until he cried, and the whole arena chanted a name, and for once, it was mine. The Emperor of Great Jin himself handed me the first place prizes. A cultivation technique called the Sun Sword, which I was thrilled to learn could fuse with my Taiyin swordplay into something far greater, and a secret technique called the Qi Men Escape, a top-tier getaway art that could blink me 100 miles in an instant, basically a spare life you keep in your pocket. Xu Guang, meanwhile, went and collected his winnings, which turned out to be the 7 Fiend sect's dragon vein, the foundation of their whole sect, which he took with an enormous smile and precisely zero remorse. And the Emperor confirmed the next step. In 2 months, the 10,000 Dynasties War, the rung above this one, the road home. I learned the Qi Men Escape in a couple of days, and then I tested it, which is where I discovered the fine print nobody mentions about instant 100-mile teleportation, which is that you have to aim it, and I had not, at that point, learned how to aim it. My first jump dropped me directly into Jiang Mei Li's room, mid-bath. There was a frozen half-second where we simply looked at each other. Then the room dropped about 40 degrees. "You," she said, in a voice that could cut steel, and a palm of pure cold energy came at my head, so I did the only sensible thing and teleported again in a blind panic, which put me somewhere even worse, which I will not describe beyond saying that a very startled young couple's evening was thoroughly and permanently ruined, and that I am, wherever you two are, deeply sorry. My third jump finally landed me outside the city walls, at which point I bent double and coughed hard, because the technique had a recoil the manual had somehow neglected to mention, and I sat down heavily in the grass to recover and to reconsider several of my recent life choices. "That's normal," Sun Yuan said cheerfully. "These techniques always cost something, otherwise you'd be invincible. You could have said that before I spat up half a lung. I assumed you knew." He assumes I know a great many things right before I get hurt by not knowing them. It's the core of our relationship. The Sun Sword needed pure yang energy to cultivate, a mystic waystone, which I didn't have, so it went on the list for later. And the Crown Prince, my new #1 fan, happened to mention he was headed to a place called the Flaming Mountain, which happened to be full of exactly that. so I decided to tag along because a volcano stuffed with the one ingredient I needed sounded like a productive afternoon, and because Li Jin, prince or not, was turning into something I didn't have many of, a friend. But before any volcano, I had two families to bury, not mine, theirs. The Zhong and Huang families were both here in the capital, both Marshal Shifu 9th level at the top, and both had spent this whole story trying to erase the Li family. I'd killed their children. They were just biding their time to kill everyone I loved the moment I left for the 10,000 Dynasties War. I was not going to spend that war wondering whether my grandfather was still breathing, so that night I went hunting. The Xiong estate went first, fast, quiet, thorough. I'll be honest, this is the coldest thing I did in this whole story, and I did it clear-eyed because I'd learned the lesson the old Li Wei died teaching me. Mercy to people who want your family dead is just a delay. Their chief, Wei Huo, wasn't home, so I moved on to the Huang family. The Huang estate was lit up late, and when I slipped onto the roof and eased a tile aside, I found all my targets in one warm, well-lit room, drinking. Wei Huo, head of the Xiong family, Zhao Guang, head of the Huang, and a third man I didn't know, older, with an aura on him like a held blade. An elder the other two spoke to very carefully. The moment the little rat leaves for the war, Zhao Guang was saying, swirling his wine, we move on the Li estate, burn it down to the stones, and when he comes crawling home with whatever metal they pin on him, there'll be nothing left but ash and a fresh grave for that senile old grandfather of his. They all laughed. They were still laughing when Sun Yuan, who has no sense of drama and no sense of timing except the very worst one available, dropped straight down through the ceiling into the middle of them and screamed at three grown martial masters to come and fight him. In the confusion, I came through the door. I took Wei Huo's head before he'd finished turning toward the noise. Zhao Guangai left to Sun Yuan, who latched onto the man's face and went to work with all 4 sets of claws, while the Huang chief ran in circles trying to peel off a monkey. That left the elder, and the elder was a real problem because the elder was a great martial Shifu, a full realm past anything I had ever fought, and he came at me the instant he understood the night had gone wrong. So I didn't give him the instant. I lit the white hair and gave him the Sword Emperor's technique before he could bring that great martial Shifu strength to bear. One strike, everything I had, and a great martial Shifu fell in his own hall to a martial Shifu 6th level who was cheating with every card in the deck. But the elder mattered because he was the first thread of something bigger. He wasn't Xiong or Huang. He was working for someone above them, some hidden power that had been aiming at me and my family this whole time, from the poisoners to the assassins to tonight, and he died sneering that everyone connected to me would pay, that I'd brought all of it on myself without ever giving me a name. I filed that away, cold and permanent. Somewhere out there was a hand I couldn't see yet, and it wanted my entire world dead. A hook to chew on another day. I finished the Huang family and got ready to leave, and only then noticed Sun Yuan hadn't followed me out. He came bounding up a minute later, looking deeply, spiritually satisfied. What did you do? I said. Left a souvenir, said the monkey. I found out the next morning, along with the rest of the horrified capital, that the 2 clans had been wiped out overnight, and that someone had relieved himself on the Huang chief's face and left a note scratched in the dirt reading Grandpa Kong was here. Martial masters were throwing up on their way out of the estate. It became the single most discussed event in the entire city, and not for the murders. 10,000 years, Sun Yuan said, entirely unrepentant, is a long time to hold it. The flaming mountain sat on the border between Great Jin and a place called the Yue Kingdom, which was a shade stronger than us and backed by something called An Country, which was much stronger than both. Li Jin warned me the Yue people like to provoke fights on this border on purpose, hoping to bait the royal family into a war their bigger friends could finish for them. The mountain itself was a volcano, and the mystic way stones I needed were set into the cliffs inside it, right over the lava. So I coated myself in cold energy off the yin pearl and jumped straight into a volcano, which is a sentence I get to say now, and harvested 100 of the stones while Li Jin watched from outside, certain I'd gone in to die. Then I got greedy. Standing on a rock in the middle of a volcano, I condensed the Xuanwei pearl I needed for the sun sword, and then, instead of quitting while I was ahead, I looked at the brand new pearl of pure fire and the old pearl of pure ice sitting side by side inside me, and I thought, I wonder what happens if… Don't, said Sun Yuan, who could feel exactly what I was about to do. Whatever it is, kid, don't. That's fire and ice. 2 absolute opposites. You need weeks of preparation and a master watching over you to even attempt. I did it anyway. The 2 extremes slammed together inside my dantian, and it hurt like the honest end of the world. My whole body locked up. For a few very long seconds, I was genuinely certain I'd just killed myself in the single dumbest way available to a cultivator. And then the 2 forces, instead of tearing me into halves, snapped together. I came out the far side with a single black and red bead sitting above my dantian, yin and yang folded into perfect balance, hitting at least 10 times harder than either pearl had alone. Sun Yuan stared at it. You insane lucky idiot, he said, which from him is genuinely high praise. Do you have any idea how many people that move has killed? That should have killed you. But it didn't. But it didn't, he agreed, deeply disgusted. It never does with you. It's infuriating. I climbed out of the volcano to find the border situation had gone from bad to worse. The Yue kingdom had cornered Li Jin's older brother, Li Xuan, out here alone, and two of their princes were circling him, taunting, one of them holding up a recording crystal so the whole world could watch. Go on, little Jin, one prince crooned. Hit me, you know you want to. One little strike, and the great Jin dynasty starts a war it cannot win, and my father's powerful friends come to help finish it. Come on, just hit me. That was the entire trap. If a member of the great Jin royal family struck first, out here, on the crystal, the Yue kingdom got its excuse and in country got its invitation. Li Jin, who'd caught up beside me, couldn't lay a single finger on them without handing Yue exactly what it was fishing for. He was shaking with the effort of not doing it. But I could. I'm not royalty. I'm just some guy from a fourth-rate clan in a nothing city. Nothing I do starts a war. It just ends people. The two Yue princes had time to register a white flash before they hit the ground. Then I walked over, took the recording crystal out of a dead man's hand, and ground it to powder under my heel. No footage, no evidence, no incident, no war, just two dead princes and a very confused Yue honor guard, whom I then used to field test my new yin-yang bead, wiping the entire squad off the mountainside with one swing, purely to find out what the thing could do. It could do a lot. The Yue kingdom now hated me with the specific passion of a royal family down two sons, and behind them and country loomed, but that was a problem for a bigger version of me. I collected my mystic yang stones, said goodbye to a deeply impressed prince and his even more deeply impressed brother, and turned for home. Because there was one more stop I needed to make before the war. I needed to see my grandfather. And I had a bad feeling I couldn't explain. The bad feeling was right. I got home to find my grandfather dying. Gray and still on his bed, veins gone black, a faint red line crawling from his stomach toward his heart. Sun Yuan took one look and named it heartbreak grass. A rare poison, almost always fatal, and the only reason the old man was still breathing at all was that whoever dosed him had used too little on purpose. There was a cure, an herb called imperishable grass, just as rare, and Li Jin told me where his father had once heard it grew, on the battlefield of the 10,000 Dynasties War, the exact place I was about to go anyway. My grandfather had maybe 2 months. The war was the cure and the countdown, both at once. But first, I had to find out who did this. And the answer broke something in me. It was Zhou Bo, the old servant who'd been with the Li family my whole borrowed life, who'd chased off the bullies when the original me was small and weak. I hid in the room and caught him bringing the poison medicine, and when I grabbed his hand, he didn't even fight. He'd been forced. Someone had taken his son, his son's wife, his newborn grandson, and told him to poison my grandfather or watch his family die. So he'd done it. And he'd cut the dose in half every single time, trying to make it slow, trying to buy time, weeping the whole way through. I couldn't kill him. I put him in a cell instead and sent word to have his family found. And that night, before I could tell him they were safe, Zhou Bo took his own life in that cell, unable to live with what they'd made him do. I gave him a proper burial. I didn't have a joke for it. I just stood there a while. The trail led to the treasure pavilion's deputy master, a man named Wu Chao, who'd handed Zhou Bo the poison. And when I stormed the pavilion to find him, I found something else. A wedding, Zhang Mei Li's wedding, forced, to Wu Chao's useless son, arranged to trap her while the family moved against everyone I cared about. Jiang Huimei sat at the head of it, gray and powerless because Wu Chao had connections and had hidden her daughter away. Then Songjian walked in, Mei Lian's father, still nursing the grudge over the daughter I'd put down in Xuan Valley. And he took one look at me standing in the wreckage of the wedding and saw his opening. He threw in with the Dong family on the spot, jabbing a shaking finger at me, screaming for the guards to seize me and wipe out the entire Li clan for what I'd done to his precious girl. Your precious girl, I said, tried to have me killed twice and got exactly what that earns. And you followed her into every worse and worse decision she ever made. Consistent family, the use. That was the last decision he followed her into. I took his head, and the Mei family, root to branch, was finally, completely finished. A promise from the very first day, paid in full. The rest of it nearly went the same way, a whole estate of Dong guards closing in, except 2 things saved a lot of lives. 1. The treasure pavilion's actual grand master had come with me, an old man named Qin Tian who never once left his tower, which meant not a single guard in the place recognized him. He drew himself up, announced grandly that he was the Grand Shifu of the entire treasure pavilion and that everyone would stand down at once, and a guard told him to sit back down, old-timer, before he embarrassed himself. The look on Qin Tian's face. I nearly ruined the whole rescue laughing. It took the Crown Prince personally vouching for him before anyone believed a word of it. 2. That same Crown Prince was standing at my back, and it turns out even a rogue deputy's little coup folds very fast against a genuine prince of the realm. The whole thing came apart in about a minute. I got Jiang Mei Li out. She'd been drugged, a fog meant to leave her helpless for the forced wedding, and I burned it out of her carefully, no funny business, and got her clear and awake and safe. She was mortified and grateful and looked at me differently afterward, the way you look at the person who walks into the worst night of your life and simply makes it stop. We didn't talk about it. We didn't have to. I turned back to make Wu Chao tell me who was really behind all of this. The poison, the coup, all of it. He opened his mouth to give me the name, and 2 streaks of light came out of nowhere and put Wu Chao and his son down before a single word got out. Silenced. By whoever had been pulling the strings this whole time, still just out of sight, still without a face. I ran outside. The street was empty. Whoever it was, they were fast, and they were careful, and they were still. Watching. I was starting to genuinely, deeply want to meet them. Li Jin had one more tip before I left. A great tomb had surfaced near a place called Suzhou, the tomb of some ancient great martial Shifu, and rumors said it held 100 spirit pills, the kind of medicine that can shove you through the wall into the great martial Shifu realm, which I badly needed, and it might hold something called Taiking Xuan water, which mattered because of Sun Yuan. He got serious for once and told me the truth he'd been sitting on. His soul was damaged. That was the real reason he couldn't leave the cauldron for long. The Tai King Xuan water could repair it. So this stop wasn't only for me, it was for my partner too. I didn't make him say please, I just went. The tomb was underwater, at the bottom of a lake, and it was crawling with prodigies from 3 countries all there for the same pills, which meant it was going to be a slaughter with extra steps. I stopped at a fancy restaurant first to gather information, ordered a bunch of bananas for Sun Yuan, and nearly fell out of my chair when the bill came because the bananas cost 950 silver. Sun Yuan ate everyone and called them the best he'd had in 10,000 years, which, at that price, they had better have been. Inside the tomb, it was exactly the murder party I'd expected, plus a giant crab the size of a house, which I killed and then, because I'm from Earth and I have priorities, ate as sashimi. Very fresh. Sun Yuan helped. 10 minutes, no crab left. The real problem was a fat Taoist, a sleazy, bald, treasure-hoarding formation master with an invisibility trick and, Sun Yuan guessed, some rare, supreme soul physique. I disliked him on sight, and for once my instincts were completely correct. 2 prodigies, the strongest young masters in the whole region, had been circling the 100 spirit pills for an hour, each too wary of the other to grab first. And while they postured, the fat Taoist simply strolled up invisible, cracked the protective barrier with one lazy hand seal, scooped all 3 pills, and then, right as he faded out, called cheerfully across the chamber, "Thanks for holding them, Brother Li. I'll get you your share later," and vanished, leaving me, standing there, holding nothing, in front of 2 furious prodigies who had just been told by name that I was the one who'd robbed them. "I have never met that man in my life," I said. They did not believe me. So I killed the 2 young masters and their factions because that is how these conversations end, and then I collected the 100 spirit pills the fat Taoist had so kindly announced were mine, right off the bodies of the people who'd tried to steal them first, which meant technically his lie came true. I did get them, just not the way he'd pictured it. But the Taoist had gotten away with the important thing, the Tai King Xuan water, and Sun Yuan was not letting that go. So we hunted him. Sun Yuan had tagged him with an invisibility-breaking pearl, and when the fat man tried to sneak the water past 3 great martial masters using his cloaking trick, Sun Yuan broke the trick at the worst possible instant so that instead of vanishing, the man's whole body went invisible except for his fat, bald, panicking head. 3 great martial masters chased a floating pig head around a cave while it screamed curses at whoever had done this to it. I have witnessed a great deal in this world. That is top 5. He escaped with a shrinking technique, but the pearl had marked him, so we tracked him to a hidden burrow where he'd stuffed himself full of healing pills, overdone it, and passed out cold. I took the Tai King Xuan water off him and handed it to Sun Yuan, who carried it into the cauldron to begin the long, careful work of fixing his own soul. Then I looked at the unconscious fat man, who had earlier promised to strip and hang whoever tricked him, and I am not a man to let a good threat go to waste. I stripped him to his gold-embroidered underthings, hung him upside down from the ceiling, gave him a spin, and left him swaying gently in the dark with a note that we'd meet again, and next time, he should bring better loot. Fair is fair. Back at the Shaoshan sect, I discovered what happens when a basement nobody wins the whole dynasty a competition. I got mobbed. disciples poured out of every corner chanting hero, and a cluster of female disciples fell into a genuinely alarming argument about the order in which they intended to marry me, negotiating amongst themselves like I was a limited release until I fled the scene entirely in the interest of my own survival. Fame is a lot. I do not recommend it on an empty stomach. Then I spent my last stretch of time saying goodbye, because I knew that once I left for the 10,000 Dynasties War, I might not be back for a long time, if ever. I said goodbye to Shu Guang first, my scheming, generous, ruthless old master, who'd fished a half-dead kid out of a siege and built him a home in a sect for the price of one impossible promise. "Try not to die out there," he said in his beggar rags, not looking at me. "You're my only disciple. It would be embarrassing. That's the warmest thing you've ever said to me. Don't get used to it." He paused. "The medicine you make, the trances. You and I both know there's no trance." He finally looked at me, and there was no anger in it, just an old man who had chosen, deliberately, not to look too closely for a very long time. "Whatever it really is, keep it hidden, and keep it alive. Now go, before I change my mind about the whole arrangement." I said goodbye to Fang Yuan, who told me the Shaoxuan sect couldn't hold me, that I belonged on a bigger and broader stage, and meant every word, and looked like he might cry into his potions. I said goodbye to Lin Qing, still loyal, still bright-eyed, the second person in this whole world to ever look at me like I hung the moon, and to my entire ridiculous army of rich kid pamphlet fans, who presented me with a farewell gift I will not be describing. Small world, the one I was leaving. But it had been the first place that was ever truly mine, and I was surprised how much it cost to walk away from it. I used the resources my newly rich master could suddenly afford, and by the time I left, I was Martial Shifu 8th level at its peak, sword intent at the 4th level, with an earth-rank footwork technique that let me move like a rumor. Strong. Not strong enough for where I was going, but strong. They tried to kill me one more time on the way out, naturally. A ship full of assassins, 3 great martial masters, and a pack of 9th levels, sent by my faceless friend in the shadows to end me before I could reach the war. I met them on the deck with the yin-yang bead, and one swing turned the whole boarding party to ash and cinders. Except 3, whom I kept breathing specifically to make talk. They bit down on poison before I got a single word out, every one of them. Dead, rather than name the hand that sent them, which told me 2 things. 1, my hidden enemy owned people body and soul. 2, they were terrified of me learning who they were. Terrified enough to spend great martial masters like loose coins, just to keep a name secret. Whoever this was, they weren't a grudge anymore. They were the plot. My ruined ship went down in flames. I jumped off, landed in a tree, dusted myself off, and kept heading for the war, because a dying grandfather doesn't wait, and a promise in a cave doesn't wait, and I was so close to the next rung I could taste it. The staging ground for the 10,000 Dynasties War was a white city floating in the clouds, and it was the single most crowded place I have ever stood. 100,000 young cultivators from more than 10,000 different dynasties all funneled into one impossible space to go kill each other for points. Reach the top 50, and you got pulled up into the Tianshuan sect, the rung above everything, the place tied to the Taishuan sect, to her. I found the Great Jin group, and I found Jiang Meili, who'd climbed all the way to Martial Shifu 9th in my absence, and who wiped the travel grime off my face with her own sleeve while scolding me for showing up looking like I'd been dragged behind the ship, which I sort of had. Somewhere in the last few months, without either of us ever saying a word about it, she'd become the person who checks whether I came back in one piece. I didn't undercut that one either. The old Emperor Li Hao gave us the talk. There were 8 invincible imperial dynasties in this war, he said, whose young geniuses were already at the great Martial Shifu realm and beyond. So far above us it wasn't a fight, it was a formality. If we saw one of them, we ran. No hesitation, no pride. Because 10 years ago, Great Jin sent its young generation into this exact war, and not one of them came home. Not one. He was not going to bury a generation twice. The Yue kingdom was there, of course. Their king, Xiaobo, glaring at me over the 2 sons I'd taken, his surviving heir Xiaohao now a great martial Shifu, and behind them the ruler of an country, promising to help wipe Great Jin off the map. So I called the king my son and his heir my grandson in front of the entire assembly, because a man about to walk into 100,000 strangers might as well make an entrance, and my own side had to physically hold in the laughter. I want you to understand exactly where I was standing in that moment, so you understand the whole distance of it. A handful of months ago, I woke up face down in the mud of a monster mountain, in a dying stranger's body, with a wound in my back and a broken heart, and a fiancée's voice in my head telling me to go die in peace. Bottom of the barrel nobody, 0 spirit stones, a humming rock in my chest I didn't understand, and now I was standing in a city in the clouds. The boy who took 2 great sects apart by himself, who carried a dead last sect to first place, who wiped out 4 clans and killed across 3 realms and earned a name people whisper, with a monkey mending his own soul inside my chest, a beautiful woman's hand finding mine, and a road at my feet that ran all the way home to a promise. The cure for my grandfather was somewhere on the battlefield in front of me. The girl I'd sworn to reach was somewhere at the top of it. And someone I still couldn't see wanted me and everyone I loved dead, badly enough to burn great martial masters just to stay hidden. None of it was finished, not one thread. That's the thing about a story like mine. You don't get to the end. You just get to the next bigger door. A vortex opened above the white city, dark and deep and pulling. Zhang Meili's hand tightened in mine. "Be careful in there," she said. "You too," I said, and I meant it more than I've meant anything. Then 100,000 of us rose toward that vortex at once. I held onto her hand as tight as I could, and I stepped through, and the vortex tore us apart the instant we crossed it. That's how the thing works, I'd learned. It doesn't set you down gently beside the people you love. It scatters 100,000 cultivators across a battlefield the size of a country and lets them find each other however they can. Or not. The last thing I felt of the small world was Zhang Meili's fingers sliding out of mine. I did not know yet how much that one small detail was going to cost me, so there I was. I landed face first on a vast open grassland, alone, under a warm spring sun, with spring wind moving the grass, and for one full second it was so peaceful I could have cried. It felt like Earth. It felt like a nap. And then something behind me tried to take my head off. I rolled on pure instinct, and the ground where I'd been standing exploded, and I came up to find a short woman with a battle axe already swinging at me again. I caught the axe on my palm and knocked it clean out of her hands. "Are you insane?" I said. "I've been here 4 seconds." "You came in late," she panted, cradling her hand. "My senior brother says the ones who come in late are the scared ones, the weak ones. Easy points. You cut them down without hesitating." I looked at her. "Your senior brother sounds like an idiot. He's usually right." He was not right this time. I snapped her neck because the battlefield of the 10,000 Dynasties War is not a place where you leave a stranger who just tried to murder you alive to try again. And my points. Jade ticked over to 2. 2 points. 100,000 people. Top 50 gets pulled up to the Tianshuan sect, and I was sitting at a proud 2. I lay back down in the grass. It really was a lovely day. "You killed my junior sister," howled a voice, and here came the senior brother himself, axe up. 3 more axe-wielding friends fanning out behind him. An entire axe gang. Wonderful. They came at me all at once, and I want to tell you it was a fight, but it wasn't. It was gardening. 4 heads left 4 sets of shoulders, and the last man dropped his own axe and sat down hard in the grass and started bargaining for his life, which is how I met Chen Gui. Chen Gui was a coward, and I mean that as a technical description, not an insult. He'd survived this long on a simple philosophy, which he explained to me at length and without any prompting. Never fight what you can flee, never flee what you can bribe. And guard, above all else, above your life, above your dignity, the one thing a man truly cannot replace, which he indicated with a protective 2-handed gesture I will not describe. "Big brother," he said, having decided in the space of 10 seconds that I was now his big brother, "I know this valuable purple ancient fruit tree improves your cultivation. I'll take you. Just please, in the name of everything holy, don't hit the eggs." I did not, at that time, hit the eggs. I let the strange little man live because he knew the terrain and because, honestly, after the graveyard quiet of that grassland, it was almost nice to have someone narrating. And so, my first hour on the greatest battlefield in the world, I acquired 2 points and 1 extremely nervous tour guide. It got better. It always gets better, right before it gets so much worse. The purple ancient fruit grew on a single ancient tree in the middle of 100 cultivators, who were all killing each other for it, which is standard, and it was guarded by a giant python that lived underground and burst up to swallow anyone who got close, which is less standard. The python's party trick I watched with my own eyes was to eat a full-grown man and then, a moment later, politely spit the bones back out. The local warlord of this particular murder picnic was a man named He Ming, short, 9th level, cruel in the specific way that small cruel men get to be when they've found people smaller than them, and he had a habit of ordering people he didn't like to go fetch the fruit, which was a slower, funnier way of feeding them to the python. He took one look at me and Chen Gui and decided we'd make excellent fetchers. "You two, go, bring me a fruit." He didn't even look up. "Or don't, and I'll help you feed the snake." "Brother," Chen Gui whispered, hiding behind me, "my rich life experience is telling me we should run. He's a full realm above us, he's got more men, and he's the kind of twisted that likes an audience. We can't win this." "Your rich life experience," I said, "is standing behind a man who kills wolves with kitchenware. Watch." I punched He Ming once. That's all it took. I felt his cultivation core cave in under my fist, and he folded, and I picked him up by the collar, and I told him very gently that he was going to go fetch me a fruit. Him, personally, and his enormous lady friend, the one who'd suggested feeding us to the snake in the first place, could go with him. The two of them made it about 3 steps toward the tree before the ground opened up and the python took them both, and a moment later spat out 2 clean sets of bones, and the crowd went very quiet. Getting the fruit after that was almost administrative. I used Chengui as bait, which he did not enjoy, and which I will hear about for the rest of my life, and when the python came up for him, I put the yin-yang bead through the roof of its mouth and turned a house-sized monster into a very large closed matter. I walked out of that clearing with an armful of purple ancient fruit and one bruised, weeping, deeply loyal tour guide who had, at some point during the python incident, promised to bring incense to my grave. Next year, on this exact day, Chengui sniffled, I will honor you. I'm not dead. I figured the snake would spit the bones so I could build you a proper. I pinned him to the ground and beat him for a while. It was, all things considered, the most fun I'd had since I got to the war. The next crowd showed up before I'd even finished wiping the sword. A dozen of them fanned out across the grass, and out front, a young man in white with the particular smirk of a person used to being the fastest thing in any room. Xingguo's #1 prodigy, one of them whispered, with real pride. 9th level at its peak, and quick, genuinely quick, the kind of speed that wins wars in his weight class. The fruit, he said, holding out a hand, not bothering to look at me. And whatever else you scraped off that tree, give it here and I'll let you keep the arm. You're the fast one, I said. I heard. The fastest. The smile widened. You won't even see it coming. Behind me, Chengui made a small sound like a man who has just remembered an urgent appointment elsewhere. The prodigy was right that I wouldn't see it. He was wrong about what that meant. He blurred, honestly blurred, crossed the whole clearing between one blink and the next, and came in low and clean for my ribs. It was a lovely strike, the best I'd seen since I got to the war. I put one line of sword intent through the spot where Lovely was going to arrive. He ran onto it. All that speed, all that talent, poured into a single point at exactly the wrong instant, and the fastest young man in Xingguo folded around a sword he never once saw and lay down in the grass he'd crossed so proudly. His dozen friends went very still. It's a specific stillness, the one a crowd makes when the man they'd been standing behind stops being a plan and becomes a lesson. Anybody else the fastest? I asked. They discovered, as a group, that they were not. Big brother, Chengui breathed, creeping out from behind a rock with the wet eyes of a man who has just found religion. You have to teach me to do that. Step 1, be me, I said. There is no step 2. And I walked off toward the next thing on my list, one weeping sidekick and a fresh crowd of very quiet onlookers trailing behind. The fruit hadn't been enough. Purple ancient fruit is good, but I'd eaten so much heavenly treasure by now that ordinary good barely moved the needle, and I was still stuck a hair under the wall I needed to break. Chengui, sensing my disappointment and eager to be useful in any way that didn't involve personal risk, mentioned the purple ancient liquid, the concentrated stuff. The real deal, up at a place with the cheerful name of Despair Slope. Despair Slope was a low hill absolutely riddled with holes, and every hole breathed purple smoke, and the purple smoke ate flesh. A dozen cultivators stood around the bottom of it staring up, having done the math and decided the thing at the top wasn't worth dying corroded for. And up at the very top, faint through the haze, was a small pool of black liquid. That's where I met Chengui's Dao companion, a sweet-faced woman named Lin Jin, who hugged him, examined his freshly beaten pig face with concern, accepted, I fell down, as an explanation, and then, when Chengui complained about something under his breath, turned on him with a smile so sharp I actually flinched on his behalf. Gentle on the outside, a wood chipper on the inside. They were, I decided, perfect for each other. I burned a hole in the purple mist with the yang half of my bead and climbed. And Despair Slope earned its name because the holes weren't breathing poison to be decorative. They were breathing it to keep people off the ants, tens of thousands of them. Black, leaf-sized, flesh-eating, pouring out of every hole on the hill the moment I climbed past the smoke, a living tide with one collective intention, which was to reduce me to a clean white skeleton in about 4 seconds. I ran, I'll admit it freely. I turned and ran down that slope with a screaming black flood at my heels, and the dozen cultivators at the bottom who'd spent the last 10 minutes mocking me, looked up, saw what was coming, and had just enough time to understand that I was running directly at them. Sorry everyone, I called, sprinting past them. I heard everything you said about me earlier. This part's on purpose. The ants took them, all of them. I got clear, the swarm lost interest and flowed back into the hill, and Despair Slope went quiet and innocent again, as if nothing had happened, as if there weren't a pool of exactly what I needed sitting right at the top. Lin Jin begged me to let it go. Chen Gui had already started mentally drafting my eulogy. And I looked at that quiet, murderous little hill, and I thought about my grandfather's cure somewhere on this battlefield, and Jiang Mei Li somewhere out in this 100,000-body meat grinder, and I decided I did not have the luxury of walking away from power that was just sitting there, so I climbed it again. The ants came again. And this time I wrapped myself in the yin-yang bead and let them come, and I didn't run, and I searched the boiling black tide until I found what a swarm like that always has hiding in a hole at the center of it. The queen. One enormous ant poking her head out to conduct the slaughter. I crossed the whole slope in a single sword-intent breath and took her head off just as she tried to duck back into her hole, and the instant she died, the entire swarm lost its mind and its purpose and scattered. The pool at the top tasted, for the record, like nothing at all, which after the ice cream fish was a genuine disappointment. But it worked. It shoved me all the way to Martial Shifu 9th level, at its very peak, one final wall away from the realm that actually mattered, so I ate the 100 spirit pills, all of them. The whole tomb's worth of great Martial Shifu barrier-breaking medicine swallowed at once, and I threw everything I had at that final wall, and the wall held. 500 spirit pills wasn't enough, I said out loud, to no one, genuinely offended. The great Martial Shifu barrier, it turns out, is not a wall you push through. It's a wall you need a key for, and I didn't have the key yet. Fine, I'd find it. What I needed first was people. My people. I said goodbye to Chen Gui and Lin Jin, told the little coward he'd die if he followed me, watched him agree with insulting speed, and I set out for the center of the battlefield, where Lin Jin said everyone was heading, to find the great Jin group, to find her. The center was across a river, not a normal river. The Tongtian River, wide as a sea and mean underneath, and the only way across was on the back of a tortoise the size of a mountain that surfaced every so often to ferry passengers over. Strangest thing about it, the cultivators waiting on the bank, sworn enemies from a dozen nations, weren't fighting. You don't start a fight on a boat that can drown everyone. Even monsters understand a truce of convenience. I got on the tortoise, made small talk with a man named Lin Yi, who was thrilled to be crossing because two of the war's top prodigies, Li Tian of Qing and someone from Rong, were supposedly about to fight somewhere ahead, and he wanted a good seat. And halfway across the water, two men named Li Tao and Xu Yang decided the truce was for cowards and started harvesting the other passengers for points. I'd have let them tire themselves out. I really would have. Points are points. But then Xu Yang climbed up onto the tortoise's head, announced that turtle blood was very good for the complexion, and started hacking at the creature's neck. The tortoise screamed and began to sink, and 100 people who'd trusted a truce started, very rapidly, to drown. I put Xu Yang in 2 pieces before his knife came down again, tossed the best healing medicine I had onto the tortoise's wound, and made Lin Yi pack it. And when Li Tao came at me screaming about avenging his idiot friend, I took both his arms off and kicked the rest of him into the river he'd been so eager to drown us all in. The tortoise steadied, stopped sinking, kept swimming. And the survivors looked at the low-level nobody who just saved every one of their lives with the specific, careful respect people reserve for a thing they've decided not to provoke. We reached the far bank, and that is where I heard it. A dozen men chasing one, and the one they were chasing was in a torn yellow royal robe, half dead on his feet, leaving a trail behind him. Li Jin. I did not decide to move. I was simply, suddenly, among his pursuers, and then his pursuers were parts, and the man who'd been about to put a sword through my friend's chest had my fist through his skull before he registered I existed. The rest tried to run. Running has never once worked. I left a dozen bodies in the grass and caught Li Jin as he finally, at long last, let himself fall. Lin Yi got a pill into him. We carried him into the trees, propped him in the crook of a big tree, and I waited, with a patience I did not feel, for the crown prince of Great Jin to open his eyes and tell me what had happened to everyone I'd left him in charge of. When he did, his face went red, and he coughed, and he wouldn't look at me. And my stomach dropped through the floor of the world. "They're dead," Li Jin whispered. "All of them. I gathered everyone. And then word came that you'd been captured by the Yue kingdom, and I couldn't just, the Yue were only about as strong as us, so we went to get you back." His voice cracked straight down the middle. There was no capture. It was bait. Yue was waiting, and Country was waiting with them, and they'd hidden how strong they really were, and He couldn't finish it. I had made a lot of people bleed in this world. I had earned a nickname for it. But I want to tell you that in that moment, sitting in a tree listening to a wounded boy tell me that my entire family away from family had walked into a slaughter carrying my name like a torch, something came off me so cold and so total that Lin Yi shouted a warning and Li Jin, my friend, started coughing blood again just from being near it. I pulled it back in. It cost me. Gao Sheng, I said, my rival. The man who'd sent a demon to kill me and then bled out his body for our sect on a 4-sect stage. Leng Ruo. The cold beauty who defended me at a banquet for no reason but that it was right. They fought, Li Jin said. To the very end. Gao Sheng and Leng Ruo, they were the last two standing. The wounds on them. Li Wei, they didn't stop until there was nothing left to stop with. And Jiang Meili. His silence was the worst sound I have ever heard. She might still be alive, he said finally. They took her. They know what she is to you. They won't waste her. They'll use her. He looked at me. This ruined boy who'd carried the guilt of it all the way across a battlefield to hand it to me. It's a trap, Li Wei. The whole thing. Her, the bodies, all of it. It's one big hook with your name on it. Good, I said, and I stood up. Then I don't have to go looking. They'd set the hook in a clearing at the foot of the mountains. 8 stone pillars. 7 of my comrades roped to 7 of them, disheveled and pale and long past bleeding, swaying in the wind like a message, which is exactly what they were. And on the 8th pillar, unconscious, barely breathing, so faint I had to press my ear to her chest to be sure at all, Jiang Meili. There was a man from Yue at the base of the pillars, holding up a portrait of my own face to a crowd, offering to trade the location of somewhere called Juku Ridge, where a bronze fragment had surfaced, to anyone who'd tell him where to find Li Wei. I could not walk up and cut them all down. They had my face on paper. The instant I showed it, every hidden and country blade in that crowd would know the trap had worked. So I did not use my sword. I used something worse. I used a plan. There was a big, mean-looking cultivator skulking at the edge of the woods, the kind of man who robs the robbers. I stopped him, asked him politely to do me a favor, broke his hand when he declined, asked again, and while he was busy screaming, I forced a pill down his throat. What did you feed me? He howled. Kidney tonic, I said. Very good for your health. But if you don't do exactly what I tell you, your kidneys are going to fail inside the hour, and you'll die screaming. So, I smiled. Let's talk about the favor. I want to be honest with you about the pill, because it becomes relevant. It was not poison. It was, in fact, an aphrodisiac of frankly irresponsible strength that I'd cooked in the cauldron for reasons that are none of your business. But he didn't know that. He thought he was a dead man on a clock, and a dead man on a clock is a very motivated employee. I sent him into the crowd to claim he knew where Li Wei was, to demand the Juku Ridge location as payment, and to hold the line no matter how they threatened him, because they would threaten him, and they'd want to send someone important to close the deal. It worked exactly the way people always work. They stalled, they menaced, my terrified employee held firm because the alternative was imaginary kidney failure, and eventually they sent someone important indeed. Xiao Hao, the king of Yue's son, the prince himself, who'd helped orchestrate the whole massacre, walking right up to a big nervous man in the woods to personally collect the head of Li Wei. My man led him deep into the trees to a big tree with dense foliage and pointed up into it, and Xiao Hao, grinning, gathered every scrap of his strength into one blade and cleaved the tree in half, roaring my name, certain he'd just split me down the middle. The tree fell in 2 clean pieces. There was no scream, because I wasn't in the tree. I was behind him, and I had been behind him the entire time, and the screaming he finally heard was coming from the rest of his UA escort, who were, one after another, discovering exactly where I actually was. Xiao Hao turned around into a forest full of his own dead men and one black figure standing in the dark with a white sword going dark and wet. So you get angry, I said, walking toward him, when your people die. He tried. Give him that. He was a great Marshal Shifu, and I was 3 realms under him, and he tried, and it did not matter in the slightest, because I made him tell me the names first. He Jianavan country, the ambush, the whole ugly shape of it, and then I put the innate stone sword between his eyes and gave the king of Yue 1 fewer son than he'd had that morning. I cut Jiang Meili down from the pillar with my own hands. She was so light, that was the thing that undid me, a little, right. Then, she'd climbed to Marshal Shifu 9th in the months I was gone. She'd become a woman who could level a courtyard, and she weighed nothing in my arms, and her heartbeat, when I finally found it, was so slow and so faint that I lost it twice between beats and had to keep pressing my ear down to be sure it was there at all. She's divine soul poisoned, Sun Yuan said quietly, no jokes in it. There's a snake in her soul. It's sleeping now. When it wakes, it'll eat her from the inside until there's nothing left, and you cannot pull it out because pulling it out shatters the soul it's coiled in. Then how do I? Put her in the cauldron. The cold there keeps the snake asleep. It buys time. It doesn't buy a cure. He paused. The cure is a thing called the pan-dragon peach. It's the only thing that peach snake loves more than a soul. Bait it out, and she lives. Where is it? I don't know, said the monkey, and for once he didn't have a single wisecrack to soften it. So I laid the woman I'd carried a promise for across a whole world into a broken god's cauldron in my own chest to keep a sleeping snake from eating her, while I went and found a peach nobody could name the location of, and I turned around to the 7 comrades still hanging from their pillars. I buried them properly, 7 graves, 7 markers, in good ground. And the Yue and An killers I'd collected along the way, I bound their corpses kneeling before those markers, foreheads to the dirt, to apologize for as long as there was anything left of them to apologize. Gao Sheng, Leng Rua, 5 others who'd crossed 100,000 enemies carrying my name and never made it home. I stood in front of those 7 stones for a long time. I did not make a single joke. Chen Gui wasn't there to beat, and there was nothing funny in me to reach for anyway. Leave it all to me now, I told them, when I finally could. Every last one of the people who did this, I won't let a single one of them get away, not one. The wind came up off the mountains and moved through the trees, and the leaves turned over all at once, and I chose to believe that meant they'd heard me. Then I went to Juku Ridge because the man who'd killed them was there, and because my cauldron had started to shake. Juku Ridge was a range of caves, and Encountry held the prize inside it, a lump of black, faintly shining mud, a substance that could upgrade a weapon's very grade. And somewhere in those caves, a bronze fragment had surfaced and vanished again, and the second I got close, the chaos cauldron in my chest started shaking hard enough to hurt. A fragment, another one of the 12. I also, at Juku Ridge, got the last piece of a puzzle I'd been carrying since a poisoner silenced himself in a treasure pavilion a lifetime ago. His name was Lan Huan, the sole survivor of a wiped-out Middle Empire called Ming, and he wanted to work together against Encountry, and to sell me on it, he told me the truth that everyone who'd ever tried to kill my family had died rather than speak. It was never really Yue, it was never really An, they were the knife, the hand was Qi Country. One of the 8 invincible empires, untouchable, patient, and it had been trying to peel Great Jin open for a generation for one specific reason, a thing my dying, dwindling home country had been quietly sitting on the whole time without me ever knowing. The human emperor seal. An ancient spirit treasure, the kind of relic whose value doesn't have a number. Qi Country had learned about it long ago from a traitor, murdered everyone else who knew, and ever since had been using smaller nations like Yue and An as deniable knives, careful never to strike directly, because striking a weak nation directly would break the balance the Tianquan sect enforced and bring the other 7 empires down on them. Every assassin, every poisoner, my grandfather's black veins, Zhou Bo's family in a cage, Zhang Mei Li on a pillar, 7 graves in the dirt behind me, all of it, all the way down, for a seal in a country too poor and too tired to know it was being hunted for it. The faceless thing that had wanted my whole world dead finally had a face. It was an empire. Good. I'd never run out of it. I chased the fragment through a cave full of fighting nations, cutting a red and black hole through anyone between me and it, and when it made its final desperate turn, it turned, of all the directions in the world, toward me. I closed my hand around one of the 12 missing pieces of my own soul, and I took it into a cave, and I fed it to the cauldron, and I climbed inside, and in the flood of pure energy that fragment let loose, I finally found the key to the wall 500 spirit pills couldn't crack. I broke through to the great martial Shifu realm. The realm the top prodigies of this war stood in. The realm I'd been an entire tier beneath since the day I arrived. I came out of that cauldron a great martial Shifu, and I hid it, wrapped my aura down small and quiet, because a man about to walk into Encountry's teeth wants at least one surprise in his pocket. Then I let Lan Huan lead me to them. Encountry met us head on, 10 of them, and their champion at the back, He Jian, great martial Shifu, 3rd level, one of the genuine top-tier monsters of the entire 10,000 Dynasties War, and the man whose name Xiao Hao had coughed up with his last breaths. The man who'd sprung the trap that killed my 7. I played dumb first, I always do. Told the front line, and Cultivator I'd killed his friends. Watched him refuse to believe a low-realm ant could do such a thing. Watched Lan Huan quietly lose his mind at my honesty, and then I took the disbelieving idiot's head off mid-sneer and let the number of surprised faces do the math. I gave Lan Huan one job. Hold Hejian for a moment, and I cut through the rest of Encountry like the grass that grassland should have been. Hearts and heads, black and red energy folding 8 great martial masters into ash and quiet. And then it was just me and Hejian. He was fast, and he was strong, and he was 3 realms and a lifetime of resources above the ant he thought he was looking at. And when his blade came down at Lan Huan, I caught it, barehanded. Let it open my palm to the bone and closed my fist around it anyway and held it there because I wanted him to see the exact moment he understood. Hejian, I said, your fight is with me. It's time to settle the bill. I spun the yin-yang bead until the world went black and red, and I told him his head was going to pay for my comrades, and then I stopped talking and showed him. One strike. A black and red line of sword chi and the top-tier monster of the 10,000 Dynasties War looked down at the thin red seam opening across his chest and tried to say something and came apart into two clean halves before the word arrived. I took his head for the graves. Lan Huan sat down in the dirt and stopped being able to speak for a while. In the cave behind Heijian, I found the black mud, the weapon upgrade substance and country had killed for. I fed it and the innate stone sword into the cauldron together, and Sun Yuan told me not to get my hopes up, that advancing a weapon of full grade was a 1 in 1,000 long shot, and then the cauldron beat those odds the way I keep beating odds, and the sword that came back out was no longer just a treasure artifact. It was an innate spirit treasure, born of heaven and earth and now grown up, rarer and meaner than anything a mortal forge could make, humming with a killing move it hadn't had before. Perish together, the technique was called. Empty the whole sword into one strike. If it doesn't kill him, it kills you. I stood in that cave, a great martial Shifu now, an innate spirit treasure in my hand, a sleeping woman kept alive by cold in my chest. 7. Fresh graves at my back, a dying grandfather a world away still waiting on a grass that grew on this very battlefield, a fairy still waiting at the top of a mountain I could finally, almost, see the shape of the climb to, and, at long last, an enemy with a name. Chi country. One of the 8 untouchable empires, the hand behind every knife. You know, Sun Yuan said, sitting on my shoulder, watching me test the weight of a sword that could now kill almost anything in one swing. The first Chaos Holy Body used to say the same face you're making right now was the last thing a lot of very important people ever saw. Good, I said. And I walked out of the cave, toward the part of the battlefield wherein country's masters were, and beyond them, the empire that had spent a generation trying to murder everyone I'd ever loved for a seal in a poor man's vault. I was so far from where I started. A dying nobody in the mud of a monster mountain, told to go die in peace. I was not going to die in peace. I was going to live, out of pure spite, all the way to the top of the world, and collect every debt along the way, starting with an empire. But that is a story for next time. Lan Huan, the second I stepped out of that cave with a golden monkey riding my shoulder, chose the single dumbest sentence available to him. You were in there 10 minutes, he said, and a monkey was born? I didn't have to answer. Sun Yuan launched off my shoulder and put both feet through Lan Huan's face. What followed was the most lopsided fight of the entire war. Lan Huan was a grown cultivator with a treasure artifact sword. Sun Yuan was 2 feet of monkey with a grudge and nothing but time. Lan Huan swung. The monkey wasn't there. Lan Huan swung again. The monkey was behind him now, and then Lan Huan was face down in the black dirt with a paw print on his cheek, promising to skin the beast alive. He did not skin the beast alive. He caught 4 more kicks to the head, gave up, and lay there making the sound of a slowly deflating tire. When? I asked the monkey, genuinely a little worried. Did you get strong enough to do that? Sun Yuan just looked at me, and I did the math. And the math said that if the monkey and I ever had a real disagreement, I might lose, and I decided very firmly not to think about that. I called him off. I still needed Lan Huan walking because Lan Huan knew the road to Chai country, and a guide with a swollen face guides just fine. He crawled up, poured a healing pill down his own throat, and spent the next hour getting the only revenge available to him. He fed me encouragement. Don't feel bad, you'll never catch Li Tian, he told me warmly. Some men are simply born better, but in my heart, you'll always be pretty good. I let him have it. He'd earned a little, because that was the name now. Li Tian, Qing country's prodigy, ranked number 1 across all 10,000 dynasties, and while I'd been burying my dead, he'd been out becoming a legend. Lan Huan told me the story with the specific joy of a man delivering bad news. Li Tian had met Xu Chengquan, the second strongest of our entire generation, a monster in his own right, and killed him. 1 strike, and then, deep in the core of this battlefield, he'd touched something that pushed his saber intent to the 5th level. Saber intent, level 5. I was sitting proudly at 4. Lan Huan watched my face for the despair he'd worked so hard to plant. What he found there made him take a step back. Why do you look happy about this? He said. Number 1 in the world. I could feel myself grinning. That's a very specific chair, and somebody's sitting in it. That is not how a normal person reacts to news like that. Walk faster, Lan Huan. Somebody might take my empire before I even get there. He looked at me. He looked at the monkey, who was also grinning. He muttered that he had somehow fallen in with the 2 most broken creatures on the whole battlefield, and he walked faster. The ground went black, not scorched, but black all the way down, the color of a dead fire, darker with every mile, and it was full of graves, thousands of them, old worn mounds stretching past the edge of sight in every direction. This is supposed to be the core, Lan Huan said, where the real treasures are. This is a cemetery, I said. Also that. It was a cemetery. And in a battle royale full of 100,000 desperate people, a silent field of graves that everyone was too frightened to cross is exactly the kind of place where the thing I needed would be sitting, waiting, guarded by whatever had made them all so frightened. Lan Huan shrieked that a grave had moved. I told him his eyes were going. Then a grave moved. A white bone hand pushed up out of the dirt. A skeleton hauled itself out of the mound, wearing 2 green flames where its eyes should have been. I revised my estimate of the afternoon sharply downward. Lan Huan, credit to him, tried. He swung his treasure artifact sword at the thing and left a scratch. One scratch. The skeleton hit him like a landslide and threw him the length of the graveyard, and it was on him again before he touched down. It would have taken his head. I got there first and knocked the thing off its feet and put the innate stone sword through its skull, and the green flames went dark. 2 things came clear. 1. These things were hard, harder than the dead have any right to be, and only the upgraded sword bit into them at all. 2. We were standing in a field of thousands of them. Lucky I did that great advance, I muttered. Brother Jiang. Lan Huan was staring at my sword. That was a treasure artifact yesterday. That is an innate spirit treasure today. The success rate of a great advance is 1 in 1,000. You do not simply do that. It's a lottery, I said. His face did a complicated thing. I've learned to recognize that thing. It's the face of a man who has just concluded the universe has a favorite child, and it is not him. It really is an innate spirit treasure, said a new voice behind me. This one wasn't despairing. This one was hungry. 2 men in red robes, Chi country red. They'd heard the whole conversation, and they were looking at my sword the way the wolf on the mountain once looked at me. Hand it over, kid, and maybe we let you live. They're both great martial masters, Lan Huan whispered. 3rd level. That's above us, Brother Li. We should run. Run. He was going to say run. He didn't get the chance. Because that was the moment every grave in the field opened at once. Hundreds of them. Bone claws tearing up out of every mound. Skeletons dragging themselves into the black air on all sides. And suddenly the 2 Chi country men and Lan Huan and I had the exact same problem and no time left to kill each other over a sword. Truce, the taller one snapped. Until these things are down. Truce, I agreed, and meant it about as much as he did. Then I walked into the army. I want to describe this properly, because it was the best 2 hours of my war. There was no crowd to perform for, no villain to humiliate, just me, a monkey, an endless tide of the dead, and a sword that had finally caught up to my ambitions. I cut, and a skeleton came apart. I cut, and another one dropped. And the more I cut, the faster I got, because the chaos cauldron in my chest was quietly eating the energy off every skeleton I killed and pouring it straight back into me. Somewhere in the 1st hour, my sword intent cracked open to the 5th level. He's about to advance, I heard Sun Yuan say, delighted, and then he corrected himself, because I wasn't about to advance. I was advancing, right there, mid-swing, and the skeletons started falling faster than they could climb out of the ground. The 2 Chi countrymen were not having 2 hours as good as mine. They were 2 realms above me, and they were struggling, and they watched a great martial Shifu of the 2nd level waltz through the horde they could barely survive, and I watched the exact moment they decided that killing me for the sword was worth breaking a truce mid-massacre. They went for Lan Huan. He was pinned against a wall of skeletons at his absolute limit. They hit him from behind and put him on the ground coughing, and then one of them had a hand around his throat, holding him up like a shopping bag. The sword, the Chi man said, all mockery, or he dies. I put on the exact face they wanted. The struggling face, the unwilling face, the face of a man doing painful arithmetic about a friend. If I give you the sword, I said, slow and reluctant, you swear you let him go. Of course, he's nothing to us. He was already grinning. He thought he'd won. Throw the sword, we throw the man, same moment. Deal? Deal, I said, and I threw the sword. And the instant both of them turned to watch a priceless innate spirit treasure arc through the air, the instant their eyes left me, I threw something else. I threw the cauldron. The Chaos Cauldron is a broken god's cooking pot the size of a wine barrel, and it was moving like a meteor, and one of them looked up just in time to understand it and dove clear. The other one, greedy to the last, kept reaching for the sword. The cauldron took him. He did not get up. The survivor scrambled after the fallen sword, got his fingers almost to the hilt, and a golden shape rocketed out of the cauldron and planted both feet on his face. Sun Yuan, who stomped the man flat several times with obvious professional satisfaction. I picked the Chai Country cultivator up off the ground by his collar. With brains like those, I told him, you threatened me. Then I made him tell me things. I won't pretend it was gentle. A knee and a cold promise involving Lan Huan's entire bottle of kidney tonic administered all at once, and the man discovered a deep and sudden love of cooperation. Everyone worth killing, he said, had gone ahead to a place called the Skull Garden, because something in there was giving off the aura of an innate spirit treasure. You're not lying to me, I said. I swear it. Just make it quick. I did not make it quick. This one had worn Chi Country red into the ambush that left 7 of my people hanging from stone pillars. I walked him to a fresh grave, where a new skeleton was just clawing its way up into the light, and I introduced them, and I put a very large rock on top so they'd have time to get properly acquainted. You two get along in there, I told the mound, and left. Lan Huan, watching all of this from the dirt, decided he was never, ever going to make me angry. Deeper in, the cemetery got worse. The white skeletons gave way to black ones. Same idea, several times harder, and cutting them anywhere but the neck did nothing at all. Take the head, and they dropped. Leave the head, and it flew up on its own and came back at you with its teeth, which is a sentence I never expected my life to require, and some of them were smart. I noticed it slowly. Most of the skeletons were stiff, mindless, swinging on instinct. But here and there stood one with red flame in its sockets instead of black, and those ones watched. Those ones hung back. Those ones I realized were pointing the others at me like a man aiming dogs. One of them caught my eye across the field, and its red flames flickered fast, like it was sending a signal, and every grave for a quarter-mile detonated at once. "Oh, so it's you," I said to the red-eyed one. "You're the one running this." "Sun Yuan offered to sit this out," said the previous chaos. Holy Body always handled his own problems, that it would be embarrassing if word got around that I'd needed help with some skeletons. "He's him," I said, cutting a skull in half. "I'm me. There is a monkey standing right there, and I would like the monkey to help." Chaos Holy Body needs a hand? Imagine the shame. Useless monkey. I'm just saying what the ancestors would want. Useless monkey. I did it myself. Of course I did it myself. For 2 hours I did it myself, a lone figure in a sea of the walking dead, and the strangest thing happened, the thing that only ever happens when the pressure is total and there's no room left to think. I stopped thinking. My footwork technique, the divine speed step, quietly broke through to its major achievement while I wasn't looking. My whole realm cracked upward under the strain. My aura went off like a bomb. And I stood there in the middle of the slaughter as a great Marshal Shifu of the 2nd level, laughing, because breaking through in the middle of a fight is the best feeling a cultivator gets, and I'd earned every ounce of it. Half an hour after that, my sword intent opened to the 6th level. By the end, there were several thousand broken skeletons stacked around me in small hills, and a cluster of terrified women from some place called Xuan Kingdom staring at me like I'd fallen out of the sky. "He killed all of them," one of them kept saying. "By himself. That's not possible." The red-eyed commander took one look at me finishing its entire army and fled, the coward, and I let it go because I had a question, and these women looked like they might have an answer. "You," I said, "any of you ever seen a plant called imperishable grass?" Because that, under everything, was still the whole point. The empire could wait. The rival could wait. Somewhere ahead on this battlefield grew the one thing that would pull the black veins out of my grandfather, and I had not crossed 2 lifetimes to lose him to a weed I couldn't find. The woman's face changed. "I know where it is. But young master, you're going to wish you hadn't asked." She led me to the edge of a walled cemetery, and I saw why. There was a barrier around the place, a black wall that swallowed a thrown pebble whole, and past it, deep in the mist, something enormous sat waiting. A skeleton the size of a house, mounted on a skeletal warhorse, and all the black smoke choking that entire graveyard was pouring off of it in slow rivers. A skeleton knight. It hadn't moved. It sat there like a monument. "The grass is in there," the woman whispered, "and so is everyone strong enough to want it." Li Tian broke the barrier and went in. "He hasn't come out." Li Tian, #1 in the world. In there. I confess my heart did something unprofessional and eager. I raised the innate stone sword and cut the barrier open. It sealed shut behind me the instant I stepped through, and I didn't care, because the grass was in here, and so was the chair I wanted, and so, somewhere, were the last of Chai Country. Inside was a nightmare with a decent woman in the middle of it. The corpses in here got up when they died. Pale heads flew loose through the air on nothing, snapping their teeth. The skeletons wore red bone instead of white and hit like falling towers. And through the middle of all of it ran a woman in white, streaked head to foot in red, a dozen of the crimson skeletons at her heels, and she saw me standing there and did the single decent thing a stranger could do in that moment. She warned me. "Why are you just standing there? Run!" She was being hunted, half dead, out of options, and she spent her breath telling a stranger to save himself. That told me everything I needed to know about her. So instead of running, I drew my sword. "Get down," I said. She stared at me. "That idiot told me to lie down? Are you deaf? Get down, right now." Something in my voice landed. She dropped on pure instinct, and a wave of black and red energy went out over the top of her and erased the crimson skeletons behind her in one pass. The heads in the air popped like soap bubbles, and then it was quiet, and she was lying in the dirt looking up at a man who'd just done in one strike what she couldn't do at all. Turns out yin and yang really disagree with the dead, I said. Pity I can't do that all day. She got up. She bowed properly, the whole way down. Thank you, young master, for saving my life. My name is Wen Yan. Her robe had torn across the shoulder in the chase. I looked pointedly at the middle distance and mentioned she might want to fix her collar, and she went red to the ears and turned around and sorted herself out, and when she faced me again, she'd recovered most of her dignity and all of her nerve. You came for the imperishable grass, she said. Didn't you? You know where it is? I know exactly where it is. She pointed, past the fighting, at the enormous seated shadow in the heart of the graveyard. It's growing on top of that. On top of the skeleton knight. Of course it was. The one thing on the battlefield I actually needed, planted like a punchline on the skull of the biggest monster in it. Has that thing moved? I asked. Not once, but it will. She looked at it with real fear. Everyone can feel it. It's going to wake up, and Qi countries here, there are 3 of them left, and their strongest is Wu Lei. He's a great martial shifu of the 4th level. Young master, please tell me you're not thinking of going near him. I was already walking. The heart of the cemetery was a war. Around a cracked stone table stood the 3 strongest people I'd ever been in a room with, and I knew it before Wen Yan named them, because you can feel a certain caliber of person the way you feel a fire. The man in purple was Li Tian, number 1 in the world. Beside and against him, circling, were Guhan of Rong and Wei Ling of Jin, the number 1 prodigies of their own invincible dynasties, all 3 of them great martial masters of the 5th level, and all 3 of them fighting each other for a small black bead on the table while pretending to fight the skeletons, and in red, off to the side, murder in his eyes, Wu Lei, Qi country. Wen Yan! Li Tian's head snapped around. You're hurt. Was it him? Did he do that? Cousin, no. He saved me. I stopped walking. Cousin, I said. It's a long story, Wen Yan muttered. One of you is from Qing and one of you is from Xuan, and you're cousins. The world's smaller than it looks. Li Tian, number 1 prodigy of all 10,000 dynasties, decided this made us friends. Brother Li, thank you for saving my cousin. If there's ever anything you need, anything at all, just say the word. Help me kill Wu Lei. The whole graveyard went quiet. Even the skeletons seemed startled. Li Tian had offered a polite nothing, the kind of favor rich people offer knowing it'll never be collected, and I'd collected it 3 seconds later in front of witnesses. Wu Lei's face came apart with rage. He was suddenly very afraid Li Tian would say yes. Brother Li, Li Tian said, pained. As you can see, the 3 of us have each other locked up. I genuinely can't reach him. If I move, the other 2 take the bead. Right, I said. No, I understand completely. I'll do it myself. And I went at Wu Lei like a thrown knife. He was a great martial shifu of the 4th level. I was 2. He sneered, set his feet, and readied 1 clean killing strike for the ant flying at him, because at his level, 1 strike was all an ant like me would need, except I wasn't going for him. I went past him, a black streak, the divine speed step at full major achievement, snatched the little black bead off the stone table before anyone's eyes could track it, and was already rolling clear when his sword smashed the table to gravel where I'd been. You dare! I dare lots of things, I said, and this time I did go for him. I kicked off the ground hard enough to crater it and came in with the innate stone sword, and Wu Lei brought his own blade up to split me in half, confident, a man 3 realms above his problem. The innate spirit treasure cut through his sword like it was soft cheese. I watched the exact instant the arithmetic failed behind his eyes. Then I finished the swing. Qi country's strongest surviving son came apart and did not get up. The black bead was mine, and so was his life. I turned to the 2 remaining prodigies with my sword still humming and asked whether either of them also wanted to try taking anything off me. They did not. Where, said Li Tian slowly, staring at me, did you come from? You're a great martial shifu of the 2nd level. Shu Chengquan was 3 realms higher than you, and he put less pressure on me than you just did standing still. I opened my mouth to enjoy that thoroughly. I didn't get to, because that was the moment the skeleton knight woke up. The wind came first, howling in from every direction, and all that black mist that had been pouring off the thing for who knows how many years suddenly reversed and rushed back into it, a whirlpool of darkness with the giant at its center, and the 2 red flames in its skull went from flickering to blazing to solid, and every hair on my body stood up. Run! Somebody screamed, and for once nobody argued. We ran for the gate, and the gate was still sealed. People were hammering the barrier with everything they had. It wasn't so much as rippling. Behind us, the giant stepped off its monument for the first time in an age, and the ground shook, and I understood we were not going to be allowed to leave until one of us was dead. And it was not going to be a person. It moved like nothing that size should, a black cyclone on a skeletal horse, and its first swing turned the cultivators too slow to dodge into things that didn't get up. I cut at it with an innate spirit treasure and left a scratch a fingernail deep. Li Tian hit it with everything he had, a sword shadow tens of meters wide, the strongest strike I'd ever watched a human being throw, and when the dust cleared, the knight's bone sword had shattered and the knight itself didn't have a mark on it. Li Tian went white. He'd emptied the tank. He had nothing left, and the giant was already turning for him. "Cut the head," I shouted, because I'd learned this graveyard's one rule the hard way. "It's a skeleton. Take the head." They heard me. Everyone still standing threw themselves at it at once. It wasn't enough. It swung the broken stump of its sword and put half of them down, and it was going to reach Li Tian before any of us could. And I did the math one more time, and the math said, the bead. Sun Yuan had told me what the little black bead was. A disposable, innate spirit treasure. A one-use bomb of the highest grade, worth a fortune. The kind of thing a man saves for the worst day of his life. This qualified. I got there the only way speed lets you get anywhere. Barely. I threw the bead into the giant's open mouth, grabbed Li Tian and Wei Ling by the backs of their robes, and ran. And behind me, the most expensive object I have ever owned went off like the end of the world. It knocked all of us flat. It blew the mist off the whole cemetery. And when I looked back, the skeleton knight was gone in a pillar of fire. Everyone was staring at me. And Guhan said in a small voice, "That was an innate spirit treasure. You self-destructed an innate spirit treasure to save us." "Life's worth more than a rock," I said, and I meant it, and I watched several of the proudest young monsters in the world quietly discover they had something to be ashamed of. Then the barrier flickered and stayed up, and my stomach dropped, because a barrier like that only holds while its maker still lives. The smoke cleared, and there on the ground, all that was left of a house-sized nightmare, sat a single cracked skull with one red flame still guttering. Inside it, and I thought, of course it rolled the bead down the wrong pipe. Of course the head survived. This graveyard had been trying to kill me with heads all day, and I'd walked right into the last one. It rose off the ground on its own. It opened and spat a beam of pure black ruin at me that I barely rolled under, and then it turned and spat the next one at the wounded cultivators behind me, and people who'd already given everything they had were thrown down and did not get up quickly. I hit it with the sword. It cracked the skull and did not finish it. It hit me back with a wall of black force and threw me the length of the cemetery. I planted the stone sword in the dirt to stop myself, knelt there, and spat. Ordinary strikes were not going to end this. The others were down, all of them. Li Tian propped on his sword, empty. Wen Yan hurt, unable to stand. The #1 prodigies of 3 invincible dynasties, lying in a graveyard, out of everything, waiting to die to a floating head. There was exactly one thing left in the sword I hadn't used. Perish together. The technique the cauldron had gifted the innate spirit treasure. Empty the entire weapon into a single strike. If it doesn't kill what you hit, it kills you. It seems, I said out loud, to nobody, dragging myself up on the sword, that I have no choice but to use that move. I didn't shout its name. Perish together is a genuinely depressing thing to shout going into a fight. I just thought it, and the innate stone sword answered, drinking every drop of power I had until it turned silver white and screamed with it, and across the graveyard the floating skull opened its jaws and began gathering a ball of black destruction aimed at my helpless new friends. We moved at the same instant. I have never gone that fast. I don't think I'll ever go that fast again. The world narrowed to one skull and one point of silver light, and just as the black ball reached full and terrible ripeness in its mouth, I arrived, and I drove a sword holding everything I had straight down its throat. The blast threw me across the cemetery. I hit the ground and stayed there, tasting copper, watching the sky over the graveyard turn silver and then black, and then finally, nothing. When the light died, the head was gone, all the way gone. And into the sudden, ringing, impossible quiet, a single small blade of black grass came drifting down out of the smoke, turning gently in the air, in no hurry at all. I got up. My legs didn't want to. I got up anyway, and I walked under it, and I held out my hand, and I let the imperishable grass settle into my palm like it had been waiting the whole time for someone to come get it. I didn't say anything clever. There was no one to say it to, and nothing clever left in me. I just stood there in a dead field at the center of a war, holding a weed, thinking about a gruff old man a whole world away who used to flick my forehead and call me his only bloodline, and who was, right now, still breathing because of the thing in my hand. I'd crossed 2 lives for a lot of reasons. That one was the first. "You did it, kid," Sun Yuan said quietly, and for once there was no joke on the end of it. "Yeah," I said, "I did." The innate stone sword had gone dull and gray in my grip, an ordinary stone with nothing left in it, spent to the last drop. "It would come back," Sun Yuan said, "if I fed it and gave it time. Everything worth having comes back if you feed it and give it time." I put it away and went to help the prodigies up off the ground. It took them a day to stop coughing and stand. When they finally did, Li Tian asked me, with a strange, careful smile, what my ranking was. I'd genuinely forgotten I had one. I dug out the points jade I'd started this whole battlefield with at a proud 2, and I looked. 30, rank 30, out of 100,000. Top 50. which meant that when this war ended, I was getting pulled up to the Tianshuan sect, the sect that sat one clean step below the Taishuan, the sect where a fairy I'd promised a lifetime ago was waiting at the top of a mountain I could finally see the shape of the climb to. Your ranking's low for how strong you are, Wei Ling said, frowning. Want us to go out and help you kill for more? 30's fine, I said. What I was actually thinking was that first place had no prize worth the wait, and I already had the only thing on this battlefield I'd come for, tucked next to a sleeping woman in the pot over my heart. They wouldn't let me leave alone. That was the strangest part. The #1 prodigies of 3 invincible empires exchanged message jade with a nobody from a country too poor to feed its cultivators, and meant it, and told me to my face that a small country boy who'd caught them all was worth more than any of them. Then they insisted on walking with me to check on my friends, on the reasonable grounds that nobody in the war could outrank them anyway, so what was the hurry? Which is the only reason all 4 of them were standing at my shoulder when we reached the stone pillars and found Li Jin tied to one. Again, there was a man in a blue robe up on the tallest pillar this time, holding a portrait of my face up to a crowd, offering a treasure artifact to anyone who could point him at Li Wei, because Qi country, he announced grandly, had promised him a spirit treasure for my head. I heard, I called up, walking out of the trees, that somebody's looking for me. He compared my face to his drawing, lit up like a festival, and made the mistake of monologuing. Wrong country's new #1 prodigy, he wanted me to know. His brothers, he wanted me to know, surrounding me. My death, he wanted me to know, was going to buy him a spirit treasure from Chai country. About Chai country, I said. I killed those. All of them. Wu Lei, too. The whole crowd laughed. Qi country was one of the 8 invincible empires. The idea that some low-realm nobody had wiped their people off this battlefield was the funniest thing they'd heard all war. The blue-robed prodigy laughed so hard he cried and told his men to tie me up. Then Li Tian stepped out of the trees behind me, and Gu Han and Wei Ling and Wen Yan, the #1 prodigies of 4 invincible dynasties, strolling out of the woods to stand at the shoulder of the nobody, and the laughing stopped like a slammed door. Li Wei is my brother, Li Tian said pleasantly, letting just enough killing intent off his body to make the whole clearing step back. Let his friend go, while I'm still asking nicely. The blue-robed prodigy went from hunting me to apologizing to me in roughly 2 seconds. Just a joke, Brother Li, a joke, ha ha ha. And he had Li Jin and Lin Yi untied and dosed with healing pills before I'd taken another step. I could have killed him. I thought about it. Instead, I told him he owed me 10,000 spirit crystals for the inconvenience, and gave him 1 hour to find them, and I watched the #1 prodigy of the 2nd-ranked empire in the world run around a battlefield, borrowing and threatening and begging, until he'd scraped together a fortune he'd be paying back for the rest of his natural life. He handed me the bag, looking like a man attending his own funeral. A few hundred creditors watched him do it, memorizing his face. Not bad, kid, I told him, patting his shoulder. You've got potential. And I fed the whole bag of spirit crystals to the cauldron to start nursing my poor gray sword back to life, and I left him there to his debt. Li Jin caught up to me at the tree line, staring at the 4 invincible dynasty prodigies trailing along behind us like I was the interesting one. Li Wei, he whispered, awed. How are all these people your friends? Teach me. I want friends like that. I looked back at them. The world's #1, and 3 more just behind him, walking a step off my shoulder like it was the natural order of things. 6 months ago, I'd been a corpse in the mud of a monster mountain, wearing another man's face, being told by a woman with a bow in her hair to go die in peace. I had not gone to die in peace. I'd taken 2 great sects with a dead last one. I'd buried the families that wronged me and the ones who did their bidding. I had a monkey who could probably beat me now, a fairy sleeping in a pot over my heart waiting on a peach I still hadn't found, an empire named at last for every knife it had ever put in my back, and the world's #1 prodigy calling me brother and meaning it, and in a pouch against my chest, wrapped like something holy, one small black blade of grass with an old man's name on it. It's simple, I told Li Jin, and I wasn't entirely joking. You just have to be worth following, and then survive long enough for everybody to notice. Somewhere ahead was the top of the mountain, and the fairy, and the peach that would wake the woman I loved, and an empire that still didn't know its own days were now numbered. But those are climbs for next time. For now, I had the grass. I had my friends. I had my grandfather's life in my pocket and a whole war behind me. Ask me if it was worth crossing 2 lifetimes for. Go on, ask me.